You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the third part of What If Naruto Meets Americandad? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of DRAGONfromheaven on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Next morning, Naruto woke up with a smile as his 3 girls cuddled up against him, making him smile. "Wake up, sweeties," he spoke out as he gave them each a soft embrace on their cheeks as they started to stir in their sleep. "Foxy, 5 more minutes," Lisa whined out as Tiffany pulled his arm closer to her and Janet nuzzled her face against his arm. "I'm sorry, but it is already nearly lunchtime and I believe the 2 of you have to check in with your parents," he said as Janet and Lisa groaned before opening their eyes. "Fine, Foxy, but you owe us big time," Lisa said with a cute glare, enchanting her beauty even more. "Sometimes I wish my mom would be like my dad and not care where I am at times," Janet grumbled out as she kissed his cheek. "My parents at least like Naruto when I told them about him, but they do like to see me on the weekends at least. Plus I need to get some more clothes," Lisa said as she got up from his chst and smiled down at him. "Ah, so all my girls are leaving," he said with a playful pout as he rubbed Janet's rear, making her smile. "Don't be sad, the new girl will be with you," Janet said as Tiffany grumbled. "I don't know, I have plans with some of my friends from work today, so I don't know when I'll get back," Tiffany said with a pout as she refused to let go of his arm. "So all my girls are leaving," he said, crying fake tears as Lisa rolled her eyes with a smile and trailed her finger down his chst. "Well, we can always have a little fun before we have to leave. Will that make up for it?" Lisa purred out as she grinded up against him as she sat on his lap as Janet moved his hand under her pajama shorts as Tiffany did the same, but as she was naked just put his hand directly on her. How long do we have?" "An hour or 2, he asked as Lisa nodded. "Good, I can do a lot in an hour," he said with a smirk as the 3 of them blushed at the predator-like grin on his face before they all let out a squeal as he pounced on them. 2 hours later. Naruto let out a chuckle as he got out of the shower to clean himself off after he had dropped off Lisa and Janet at their parents' houses and Tiffany at her workplace before coming back home. After he was done they would be lucky to even walk correctly as he hadn't gone all out on them like he usually did. "So, what are you going to spend your day doing?" Amaterasu asked as she stared at him from the living room couch as he reached the stairs. "Honestly, I have no clue at all. Probably check up at work to see if they need anything from me or not. Could check up on Hailey to see how she is doing. Don't know for sure yet, just something to keep myself from boredom," Naruto said. "Also, what are you going to do today? I mean, there isn't much to do here really aside from interacting with Kurama. Like I would ever want to interact with that perverted rug," Amaterasu said with a humph as she gave him an annoyed look. "I'll probably just do what I sometimes do whenever Tiffany is out for the day at work." "Which would be?" Naruto asked, since he did wonder what Ami would do back at the one apartment Ami and Tiffany used to live at. "Well, I used to just stand guard of the apartment so that no one would come in and steal Tiffany's belongings. I sometimes pulled out a book to read, watched some of my soap operas, or watched a few movies that were lying around. Other than that I would just nap," Ami said without any concern. "Well, have fun, and if Kurama bugs you just bop him on the nose," he said with a chuckle while the thought of a spirit watching soap operas amused him. "Oh, don't worry, I would do that regardless if you were to bug me or not," Ami replied back before she grabbed the remote with her tail and started surfing through the stations so she could find her usual channels. Naruto chuckled as he went back into his room to change into clean clothes as he only wore a towel out of the shower when he noticed his phone chiming on the nightstand. He slid open his phone and smiled as he saw he had a few texts from Hailey and surprisingly Francine as well. "Hey Naruto, I was wondering if you wanted to come over to my house to talk. You don't have to worry about my dad since he is on some CIA fishing trip or whatever." Smiley face, Hailey. "Naruto, I really need someone to talk to. Stan forgot our anniversary again and if he doesn't remember by the end of the day I fear I will murder him," sad face, Francine. "I can probably kill two birds with one stone this way," he thought as he replied to both of them telling them that the other was wanting to talk so they could all hang out, which they were open to doing happily. After waving goodbye to Ami and Kurama, who was panting at Ami from the recliner with a sore nose, he got into his car and started it before heading towards the Smith residence. As he pulled up he frowned at the odd van that was parked in their driveway before he saw the door slam on the face of a blonde-haired man that honestly reminded him of a hippie hobo. "Hello, who are you?" the man asked him with an airhead and clearly stoner tone as Naruto rose an eyebrow as he pointed to the house. "I'm friends of the Smiths so I was coming to visit. Who are you?" he asked as the man narrowed his eyes a bit. "Why I'm Hailey boyfriend of course," he said until Hailey's voice rang out. "You are not my boyfriend, now leave me alone you creep," she yelled as Naruto chuckled. "Well, doesn't seem like you are and I would go if I were you. She can get scary when she's angry," he said with a slight chuckle as he passed the man he now recognized as Jeff since he remembered Hailey talk about him when he had picked her up from the STRPCLB. He watched as Jeff got into his van as it sputtered off towards the distance before he went up to the door and knocked on it. The door opened showing Hailey in a violet button-up shirt that had only the second button done to reveal a great amount of cleavage as well as her entire stomach, leaving little to the imagination. "I told you to leave me alone oh!" Hailey yelled before she realized it was him and not Jeff. "Hey Hailey, doing better than from the other day? You definitely are looking better," he teased as she blushed a bit with a smile before she quickly turned around to button up her shirt more but left the top one undone. "Why yeah, though it was mostly because of you offering me a place to go and relax at when things get crazy here," Hailey said with a appealing smile. "And no problem at all Hailey. Say, would you like to hit the mall later? Just wondering so that you could maybe get some new stuff for your room at my place." "My treat," he asked getting Hailey to feel pretty happy with the idea of spending time with Naruto and even getting some stuff she had wanted to get for a long time that her control freak father wouldn't let her get under his roof. Well she did get some of that stuff but her father had either shot/bombed them to smithereens or burned them in the basement furnace. "That actually sounds really great Naruto, but are you sure you're okay with that? I'd feel bad for making you spend your money," she said as she let him into the house and closed it behind them. "Nonsense Hailey, I want you to feel welcomed in my house and you being able to customize your room would help with that," he said as he stroked her cheek making her blush before he heard Francine come into the room. "Naruto. I thought I told you to call when you got here," she said as he smiled, pulling his hand away from Hailey's cheek, much to her displeasure. "Well I like to surprise people," he said as he accepted Francine's hug before he slipped his arm around Hailey's waist, making her smile as they sat on the couch. "So Francine, what is it I hear about Stan being an ass?" he asked as Francine let out a sad sigh. "Quick note, it will be strong to do German accent for Klaus so please bear with us." "Well, that isn't anything new since Stan is a colossal as," Naruto heard the fish say as Francine froze as she forgot to hide Klaus. Not a spirit," he thought with a raised eyebrow as he looked over the small goldfish in the bowl. "Are you some kind of man in a fish body?" he asked as Francine was shocked he wasn't somewhat freaking out. Hailey on the other hand saw her mother's shocked look and understood what was going through her head. She didn't know that Naruto was used to talking animals due to his pet fox living with him. Yes, main name is Klaus," he said as he popped out of the fishbowl and stuck out one of his fins as to handshake. "Pleasure to meet you Klaus, my name is Naruto," Naruto said with a friendly smile as he shook the fish's fin with his index finger and thumb. "You aren't freaked out or anything? Francine asked curiously and a little excited as he shook his head and shrugged his shoulders. No, not really. With my job and everything I am used to weirder things, so a talking fish is nothing new to me, he said as he lied and used his job to cover up of how he used to talking animals. See, I told you he wouldn't really freak out or anything, Mom, Hailey said as she relaxed as Naruto's hand rubbed her side comfortably. That's a relief, Francine said with a smile before she got back on track and started to tell Naruto of how Stan had forgotten their anniversary for the umpteenth time. Oh. Let's watch the tape again, Franny, voice from upstairs said as it made Francine and Hailey to a lesser degree freeze up and feel their hearts skip a few beats. Naruto rose an eyebrow as he saw a roughly 5-foot-tall creature with gray skin and a large head almost waddle in before placing a videotape in the TV. An alien, I think. Definitely don't see this every day, he thought as he turned his view to the TV for a second as Francine and Hailey seemed to freeze up in terror. Wow, Francine, you really went to town on him, Naruto said with a loud amused chuckle as the tape ended. Roger. What are you doing? We have company. Francine screamed as Roger widened his large doe eyes towards Naruto, realizing that he didn't see the guest when coming down the stairs. What's up? Naruto waved with a smirk as everybody looked at Naruto in mild shock. What? I said my job has a lot of weird things in it and it's not like I'm an alien hunter or anything, he said as he squeezed Hailey's side to calm her down before smiling at Francine. Roger on the other hand was a mixture of relief and freaking out because there was finally someone besides the Smiths that knew him and his identity. He could possibly get the chance to actually talk to someone new, but with how Stan acts at times he would maybe lose it once Stan found out. DMN him. He may have saved his life at Area 51, but the guy was a total douchebag and expected everything he wished be done in perfection. Hi, Roger stuttered shyly before he pointed to the stairs. I am going to head back upstairs, he said as he was still a bit shaken up by it all before he left. Well, that was interesting, he said with a laugh as he saw their shocked faces. So, you were saying, Francine? I think you were at the part where Stan ignored your hints and lingerie this morning before making a mess, he said as she slowly got out of her shocked state and nodded. She was beyond thankful that Naruto had surprised them by not being affected by Roger or Klaus, since she really didn't want Stan to erase any of the kind man's memories, as she had found that he was someone perfect to talk to. He was sweet, charming, made her feel young again, and not to mention hot. Plus he actually listened to her problems, unlike a certain somebody who only stared at her chst the entire time. As they seemed to talk for hours until it was near afternoon, she sighed. I'm sorry, Naruto, I've been talking your ear off for too long and have probably taken up too much time since you probably had plans, she said with a frown before he chuckled, clearly amused. You are fine, Francine. I don't mind listening to your problems at all, since today was a free day with my only real plans was to go to the mall with Hailey. Either way I needed time to kill, and even if I had plans I would easily reschedule them to help a dear friend, he said as Francine grew a very light blush on her cheeks that thankfully her daughter didn't notice. Well, I shouldn't hold you two kids in any longer. You go and enjoy the mall, but I want to see your new room at his house, Hailey, Francine said as he smiled at her daughter. Are you sure? There is no rush, right, Hailey? He asked as she shook her head. Yeah, Mom, if Dad is being in, but we might as well keep you company, Hailey said as either way she got to spend time with Naruto. Yes, I'll be fine, you two go and enjoy yourselves, Francine said as Hailey smiled and nodded, while Naruto heard a slight undertone of sadness and hoped she would be okay. Well, if you do need anything you have my number, he said as he gave Francine a hug, which she returned before she nodded. Do you need anything from the mall? He asked as she shook her head. No, I'm fine, she said as she started to urge them out of the house. Okay, see you when I get back, Mom, Hailey said as he mother basically pushed them out of the house. Well, off to the mall I guess, he said as he shrugged his shoulders and opened his car door for her with a smile. I guess so, she said as she was a bit worried for her mom as she got in the car. Langley Falls Shopping Mall. Naruto smiled as he walked around the mall with his arm over Hailey's shoulder. They had been to several stores and got a lot of things for Hailey's new room after he repeatedly told her that he didn't mind paying for them. In the end she repeatedly gave in and went through with the purchases before the process started all over again at the very next store. As they got closer to the food court, Hailey paused for a second. "I kind of have to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back." "Don't wander off or anything," she joked as he chuckled and gave a mock salute before she headed towards the closest restroom. "Oh my, at the mall on a date with another girl? How do you think Lisa will react to this?" A familiar voice chimed out as he turned to see Lindsay in her familiar outfit that reminded him of a Catholic schoolgirl. He chuckled with a smirk as he saw her eating on a red, white and blue popsicle. "Well, I'm helping out my neighbor buy some furniture since her father is being a jerk and basically took away her freedom in her room," he said as she smirked at him. "Well, that's very nice of you, Naruto," she said as she purposely ate on the tip of the popsicle in a suggestive manner. "Well, what are you doing right now, Lindsay, all by your lonesome?" Naruto asked as she shook her head before pulling the popsicle out of her mouth. "I'm actually here with my friend Jules. Do you want to meet her?" she asked as he nodded. "Now here's your true test, Naruto, don't fail," Lindsay thought, smirking mentally. "Sure. If she is a friend of yours she must be nice," he said as Lindsay smiled and waved over her friend. Naruto's face didn't change any as a very tall and muscular girl with red hair in 2 pigtails walked over, unintentionally stomping. While she was walking over, stores closed, people ran away, and he even saw Steve and his friends moved away as one of them even shouted, "Godzilla." "Hi, I'm Jules," the girl said as she held out her hand. "Why, it is a pleasure to meet you, Jules," he said as he shook her hand and smiled at her. "Nice grip you got there. So how long have you and Lindsay known each other?" he asked as Lindsay watched Naruto and her childhood friend talk normally, surprising her, but she didn't show it. Lindsay was beyond happy and shocked as the boy she had the largest crush on was treating Jules like a regular person. She hadn't seen him cringe or anything. It seemed to him Jules was any other acquaintance. She smiled as Jules went off to grab some food before she hugged onto his arm. "You are so sweet," she said as he rose an eyebrow at her. "Why? What did I do?" he asked, even though he already had an idea. He wasn't one of the top CIA agents for nothing, as she smiled at him even more. "You treated Jules like a normal girl. She's been teased and bullied due to her physical disability basically all her life," she said as he nodded. "Of course I would. I hate people who judge others or just fall for others due to only their appearance. I believe how a person is and how their personality is matters more than anything to me," he said as Lindsay stared at him in amazement and hidden love. "Do you think then you could help find someone for Jules? I'll make it up to you with a date. I'm sure Lisa would understand since she knows Jules," she said as she trailed her finger down his chest before blushing slightly at how rock-strong his chest was. "Oh, I definitely have someone in mind," Naruto said with an evil smirk, while laughing evilly in his head while one boy in the mall felt a cold chill run down his back. Smith's house/earlier. What's this? To Me by Naruto Uzumaki. Wasn't that the blonde's name from earlier? Roger thought out loud as Francine had said he had gotten a package that was addressed to her but had a note inside that said, "To, Roger." As he opened up the package he saw an assortment of clothes inside, confusing him for a moment before he noticed a note that was inside of the clothes. "Hello, Roger. You are probably wondering why all of the clothes, or something like it. Well, I had a feeling that you were very cooped up at the Smith's residence after who knows how long, so I decided to give you some new clothes that I bought personally for you. I will have to drop by in the next few days to give you some more, but this should be enough for now. Reason being is that I figured that you could use these assortment of clothes as a start before getting more that suits your interests to hide your appearance and be able to interact with modern society and go out and have the time of your life, because we all have one life and deserve to fulfill it to the fullest. All I ask in return is for you to have fun and don't go too crazy to get yourself caught. Sincerely, Naruto." Oh, someone cares about me, someone actually cares about me. I will take your advice to heart, Naruto. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Roger gasped. He could probably have a normal life now. He stood up from his bed and cheered happily. Naruto probably didn't realize this, but Roger would take his advice to his very grave. Mall, present time. So how does tonight at 7 sound? There's this nice family restaurant that I know of that I think Jules might like, he said as Lindsay smiled. The one near the movie theater, she asked as he nodded. Great, I'll see you there, she said before she got on her tiptoes to quickly embrace him on the cheek before rushing off with a blush to hang out with Jules. Naruto decided to rest at a table in the food court before he realized his target was sitting not 3 tables away before he looked at the ladies' restroom to see that Hailey still hadn't returned. I have time to do this before she gets back, he thought as he silently made his way over to Steve's table. Hey Steve, what you doing? Naruto said as he snuck up behind Steve, making him jump nearly out of his seat. And Naruto, what do you want? Steve asked, still slightly afraid of the blonde considering he did throw him out a window. Well, I kind of wanted to make up for the whole throwing you out the window thing and thought I'd be able to, since I am having dinner with a friend of mine and she wanted someone to go out with her friend while we talk, he said as Steve rose an eyebrow. Is the friend hot? He asked as Naruto smirked mentally as he nodded. Yeah, she is perfect for you, he said with a smirk as Steve grew a large smile. It's at the family diner near the movie theater tonight at say 7, so don't be late, he said as Steve nodded excitedly before he noticed Hailey waving him over urgently as she held her phone to her ear. Hailey, what's wrong? Is everything okay? Naruto asked, finally arriving to the table looking concerned. Listen to this, Hailey said as she held her phone up to his ear. He probably doesn't even find me attractive anymore, Francine said with a slur in her tone in between slight hiccups. I mean, I wore a see-through dress and he just didn't even look at me, she cried out before her cry turned into a mix between a mm and a squeak as he heard a buzzer from what sounded like a washing machine go off. I can't even get off with this DMN washing machine, she whined as he pushed the phone away as he hoped that Hailey didn't hear that bit. I think I should get home. My mom sounds really drunk and I think she needs me there for her, she said with a frown as he nodded. Yeah, it would be best for you to be there for her. I'll probably drop by later to check on her and you, he said as she nodded and smiled at him. Thanks Naruto, I haven't seen my mom like this ever and I'm a bit worried, she said as they headed towards the exit of the mall. No problem at all Hailey, I hope she's okay though, he said with a frown before it turned into a smile. Say, what is your mom's favorite comfort food? You know, like what she eats to cheer herself up, he asked as they reached his car. She really likes muffins, any kind, really, like blueberry, chocolate, you name it. She especially likes the ones from this little coffee shop near our house I think, Hailey said as she got into the car after he opened her door for her. Well, we can go pick up some real fast for her. It'll be a sweet gesture to show that even if I can't be there to help she has my support, he said as Hailey smiled. That is really sweet of you Naruto, she said as he started the car. Well, with everything that poor woman goes through because of Stan, I feel she needs all the support she can get, he said with a frown as they exited the parking lot of the mall. Before heading to Hailey's house they made sure to quickly drop by the coffee shop. To show he really was there for her he bought every muffin they had, which was around 20 or so before he drove Hailey home. Tell your mom I hope she feels better, he said as she nodded and set the box of assorted muffins down for a second before she dug through her pockets for her key. I will, and even if your mall date got cut short I still had a great time and appreciate it, she said as he grew a smirk. Oh, so this was a date, he asked as he stroked her cheeks softly, making her blush a bright shade of red. So like any date shouldn't I embrace my date at the door, he asked as she let out a soft squeak as she nodded slightly. Naruto smiled as he slowly leaned down and kissed Hailey deeply as she wrapped her arms around his neck and returned the embrace, deepening it by sliding her tongue in his mouth. He was about to move his hands down to her rear since she always asked for a spank during the last 2 times they made out when the door flung open to reveal Francine wobbling at the door frame with a glass of wine in her hand. Ah, would you look at you two, making out with such love. Francine said as she blushed as Hailey pulled away with a large blush. Mom. You need to stop drinking, Hailey said as she grabbed the wine glass from her mom, making her mom whine until she saw the muffins. Oh, you got me muffins, you are such a sweetie. Francine said with a squeal as she hugged Hailey, pressing her face into her bust that was slightly revealed as her dress strap was starting to slip. Mom. Hailey squeaked out with a blush as she pulled away from her mom. Naruto got you those since he has to go, she said as her mom finally let her go and smiled at Naruto. Oh well, aren't you a dear, she said as she moved to hug him and grabbed his head before she shoved it in between her large melons as she smiled and pet his head. Naruto held back a blush as he felt her soft melons against his face and could see Hailey blushing bright red as she watched and tried to pull her mother off her sort of boyfriend. If I were single I would mount you so fast, she whispered to him before Hailey was finally able to get her mother to let go of him. Come on Mom, let's get you to bed to sleep this off in case Dad does come back and makes it up to you, Hailey said as she pulled her mom inside with one arm as she carried the box of muffins in the other. Naruto waved to Hailey as she quickly shut the door just in time to stop him from seeing Francine as she was about to pull down her dress. As he got back into his car he started to let out a laugh as he rested his head against the steering wheel. DMN Francine, you are too much, he thought as his laughter died down before he started the car up again since he still needed to get ready for his date with Lindsay. Oh Steve, I wonder how you will enjoy my little revenge, he thought as he drove back to his house, excited for the date and to see Steve's reactions to it all. Hailey. Hailey let out a sigh as she had finally gotten her mother to lay down and go to sleep and thankfully kept her from flashing Naruto. She was about to head to her room to pack up a few things that she wanted to bring over to Naruto's when she saw Steve standing in front of his mirror as he seemed to be talking to himself. She will fall for you, and then you can bring her home and get lucky, he said as she laughed loudly, making him jump and turn to face her. You have a date little brother, she asked as she chuckled at him. Why yes I do, Naruto, a kid from school set me up with a friend of this girl he is getting together with to catch up with, Steve said with a lecherous grin as Hailey grew curious since she knew Naruto wasn't particularly fond of her brother. Okay then, she said in a wary tone before she pulled out her phone to text Naruto. She knew of the situation so she was a bit curious if this girl he was going out on a date with would be joining or not. Plus she wanted to know if this was a prank or something on her brother since she doubted he would honestly set her perverted nerdy brother on a date. She nearly choked in laughter as she read what Naruto said in the text with the reason behind it all. Steve was probably not paying attention because he was doing air move to the mirror, which caused her to GG in disgust. Well, be sure to knock her dead little bro, she said as she struggled to cover up her laughs before she left to go to her room. I feel bad for you little bro, but at the same time I don't. Restaurant. Naruto smiled at Lindsay as she waved him and Steve over to their table. Where's my date since Lindsay is your friend? Steve asked as he looked around before Naruto pointed to a girl that was sitting in a booth near Lindsay's table before Steve went pale. Hell no. I am not going on date with her. Steve yelled before Naruto grabbed his shoulders and glared at him. Hey, listen here Steve, I don't know if it isn't obvious to you but majority of the girls at school think you are really creepy and gross if not stalkerish so Lindsay, being the popular girl she is, might be able to spread word around school of how nice you are for spending time with Jules. I'm not saying to make out with her if you don't want to but at least treat her like the person and girl she is. It'll help you out in the long run if you pull through the whole date, he said as Steve shivered from the intense glare Naruto sent at him. Plus if you make her cry I can promise you no girl will ever let you touch them due to them desperately avoiding you and the fact I will neuter you, he whispered out as Steve nodded before essentially running to the booth with Jewel. Oh Steve seems excited, Lindsay said as he pulled out her chair, which made her giggle. Well, what can you say he hasn't been out in a while and who knows, maybe he can be a sweet guy despite what everyone else says, he said as he sat down and smiled at Lindsay. So Lisa was okay with this little get-together of ours? Lindsay asked as he nodded with a smile. She was actually excited that I was getting close with her friends since she likes the idea of it, he said as he gave her a smirk before the waiter arrived to take their orders as Lindsay looked at him with a slight blush on her freckled cheeks at the suggestion he had dropped. So how are you and Lisa doing anyways? Lindsay asked after she ordered her food. Last I heard you two were pretty close, Lindsay said as she leaned over with a smirk, showing off her cleavage as she purposely had undid an extra button while getting ready earlier. Oh, we are doing very well so far. We've been spending a lot of time together and she loves trying out new things to make it even more interesting. All in all it's been pretty great so far, Naruto said as he took a sip of his drink while he felt Lindsay's leg brush up against his. So Lisa's adventurous. Never would have guessed that Lisa would be willing to let her boyfriend flirt with other girls, she teased as he smiled at her with a chuckle. Well, you can say I bring it out in her, but she actually encouraged me coming here tonight and get to know you better, he said with a smile as Lindsay grew curious. She knew Naruto was a kind and sweet guy, but to believe that Lisa was allowing this was a bit odd to her. Well, let's see how this actually goes, Lindsay thought with a smirk as she figured if Lisa was really okay with this then she could get some fun time with her crush. Naruto smiled as he and Lindsay talked and flirted back and forth for an hour or so as they enjoyed their meal while Jewel started to throw herself at Steve. Get a room you two, Lindsay teased as she frowned at the time before she smiled as an idea formed in her head. Hey! Naruto, can we maybe head over to your house to get some privacy? Lindsay asked as she ran her finger down his bicep with a flirtatious grin. Right now isn't a good time since I have roommates that I think want to keep their privacy, he said with a slight frown. But we can relax in my backyard if you want, there is a hot tub and bunch of other stuff we can relax with. Oh, trying to see me in a bikini are we? She teased as he chuckled and shook his head. Not my immediate intent, but I can't say it doesn't interest me, he said as she giggled and nodded. Come on, Jules, Naruto is taking us to his house in his car, Lindsay said as Jules smiled and grabbed Steve and started to pull him out of the restaurant as Naruto paid for the bill. It's the orange car, Jules. Get into the back and be careful, he yelled out at them as he unlocked his car. So I finally get to see the inside of the hottest car in school, she asked as he opened up her door for her with a smile. You could have always asked for a ride, he said as Lindsay smirked at him. And missed the pleasure of riding in it as your date for the first time? No thanks, she said with a giggle as he closed the door and chuckled. Is everyone buckled up? He asked as he held back a chuckle as Steve looked like he was about to pass out as Jules held him tightly. All good over here, Lindsay said as she placed her hand on his thigh with a smile, though do you think you can drop by my house real quick to grab my swimsuit? She asked as she rubbed his thigh softly. Sounds fine to me, Lindsay, just direct me to your house, he said as he started the car with a smile as he drove towards her house. So Lindsay, have you been enjoying yourself so far? He asked as he took one hand off the steering wheel and slowly trailed it up her long legs before he got to her upper thigh and started to rub it, making her bite her lip softly. Oh, definitely so, she said as she smirked at him and slid up her skirt to expose her white panties. She smiled up at him as he looked down at her panties, expecting his face to turn bright red before she held back a gasp as she looked down as she bit her lip. Well, I am glad you did, he said as he rubbed her over her panties gently before she looked at him. Are you okay, Lindsay? You look a little flushed, he teased as she gave him a playful pout. Jules, do you need to pick up a bathing suit or something? He asked as Jules looked to Lindsay, who gave her a very slight shake of her head. I'm good, me and Steve can look around your backyard while you and Lindsay have fun, Jules said as Lindsay smiled and let out a quick squeak as his face heated up in a dark blush as she felt his fingers rub and press against her butt before rubbing her lower lips in a way that sent a jolt up her spine. She arched her back a bit as he continued to rub her womanhood until she let out a soft whine as he pulled his hand away. She tried to keep her waist pressed up against him but pouted as he moved his hand back to the steering wheel. She frowned as he smirked at her before looking back to the road before she looked out the window with a large blush as she realized what had just happened to her. As it kicked in, she quickly brought out her cell phone and started typing a text to Lisa. Lisa, I'm just checking in. Naruto is taking me back to his house, well, backyard of his house, and I have to make 100% sure on this. Are you seriously okay with this, like he said of you letting him be with other girls? Because he kind of rubbed my pee-pee a bit after I sort of flashed my panties to him. I was expecting him to just blush, but God, it felt good, and I am kind of freaking out here cause I don't want to betray you, she typed as Naruto had pulled up to her house. We'll wait out here for you to grab your suit, he said with a smile as she nodded and got out of the car before quickly running upstairs before her phone chimed and she saw it was from Lisa. Hey Lind. I'm glad you had a fun time, he can be really sweet and I bet he offered to let you use the hot tub. You are such a sweet friend, but yes, I am okay with this. Trust me, just have him explain his situation to you and you will understand why. And a little piece of advice, with Naruto, if you try and start something he will finish. Not to say he would ever force himself on you, but he is pretty immune to teasing. Also yeah, he's really good at that kind of stuff. Have fun, the text said as Lindsay blushed slightly. She was a bit surprised as had basically been given the okay to fool around with her best friend's boyfriend and to have fun. Lisa, I really hope you know what you are doing and this isn't some sick joke, Lindsay said to herself as she went into her dresser and grabbed her favorite bikini and changed into it before heading back to the car. All good? Naruto asked as she nodded with a smile. Yeah, all good, I have it on under my clothes, Lindsay said as she inched up her skirt again with a smirk. She watched Naruto take a peek and smile. Nice bikini bottoms, he said as she smiled and got back in the car before looking at Jules to see that she had her arms wrapped around Steve, in a suffocating kind of way. Aw, you guys are so cute, she said with a smile as Steve grimaced and tried to wiggle out of her arms. If Steve plays his cards right he might get lucky, Jules said as Steve grew green in the face, making Naruto frown before he just kept driving. So, Lindsay said with a smile as she hiked up her skirt again to show off her bikini bottoms. Lisa said I should ask about some situation of yours. Her smile turned to a pout as he didn't take her bait before smirking at her. I can explain once we get to my house, he said before he put his hand on her thigh and slid her skirt back down while he made sure to graze his hand against her. You can be patient, he whispered to her as she blushed and bit her lip. Naruto wasn't surprised that Lisa brought up his situation to Lindsay, but considering he was planning to do it anyways, so it didn't really do anything besides accelerate what he already had planned. He smirked as pulled up to his house before opening up their doors for him as he parked in his driveway. Once Jewel got out he realized how quick Steve could run as he quickly ran to his backyard. His backyard was a massive and lush with green grass as there was a lounge area around a fire pit with a large screen behind as he used that for outdoor movies. Closer to the house as a large hot tub that was currently covered up. Wow, not only is your house amazing but your backyard is amazing as well, Lindsay said as she looked around as Steve was going to the hot tub before Jewel picked him up. Naruto, can we watch a movie? Jewel asked as he smiled and nodded as he opened his screen door to grab a black tablet as he handed it to Jewel. That controls the projector and the movies it plays, so have fun but don't blare the sound too much. Wouldn't want to disturb the neighbors, he said as Jewel grew a massive smile and nodded before pulling Steve towards the seats and browsing through various films before finding one that piqued her interests. Well Naruto, I don't see any trunks on you. Don't tell me you're going to go commando, she teased as he leaned towards her. You'd like that too much, he teased as she blushed a bit before he pointed to a small fenced area. I have a changing room built in case I have guests over, so I will be changing there, but you can relax in there until I get back, he said as she shook her head. No, I'll wait, Lindsay said as she sat on top of the covered hot tub and gave him another look up her skirt. Naruto chuckled as he walked over to his changing room shed before taking a glance over to Jules and Steve. Steve looked pretty uncomfortable sitting next to Jules, but Naruto could tell he was trying to keep his patience for the chance of bringing up his reputation at school. Well, it wasn't going to be much with how low his reputation really is, so he has quite a ways to go until any girl so far would even consider dating him, much less looking at him. Slim chance, mind you. After he changed into his orange shorts that had a black chain pattern around his right thigh, he headed back out to see that Lindsay had discarded her clothes to the side of the hot tub and was now clad in her bikini. Her bikini was very small, as the top was just two small dark red triangles that were just big enough to cover her nipples, as the bottoms were essentially a red thong, as her peach wasn't covered by anything but a thin string. All in all, it left little to no imagination. "You like Naruto?" she asked as she gave him a flirtatious grin and crossed her arms under her bust to make them bounce a bit. "It looks great on you, Lindsay, very fitting for a beauty like you," he said as she blushed and smiled as he uncovered the hot tub and started the jets and heated it up quickly. After checking the hot tub for a bit to see if it had warmed up, Naruto went inside and motioned Lindsay for her to join him. She smiled at him as she tested the waters a bit, and she smiled as it felt it perfect. Before she got deeper into the hot tub, she felt totally relaxed, with feeling all of her stress and worries just drift away. "This feels perfect," she said as she scooted over to Naruto with a smile. "Figured you would feel that way, Lindsay. I always love to leak out here to let these hot waters relax my sore muscles," he said as Lindsay smiled. "And you relax with Lisa here?" she asked as he nodded with a smile. "Occasionally, though I always enjoy relaxing with a gorgeous girl," he whispered to her as she smiled and moved a bit closer. "So, what is this situation Lisa spoke about to make her so willing to let me go on a date with you and not be mad when you basically almost made me leak in the car?" she purred out as he chuckled and wrapped his arm around her. "Well, just know that I am not forcing you to go along with this, it is just the reasoning behind why Lisa is so relaxed about it," he said as she nodded before he started to explain everything to her. Lindsay was about to call bull on the whole spirit deal until she saw the serious look in his eyes. "I can show you Kurama later, but I have told you everything and I mean every word of it," he said as Lindsay frowned. "Who all are with you?" Lindsay asked as Naruto rubbed his chin. "Well, there's Lisa, Tiffany, Hailey, who is Steve's older sister, and then sort of Janet," he said as Lindsay crossed her arms in thought as she looked at him. "And they all are fine with sharing you?" she asked as he nodded. "Yes, I care for them all very dearly and show them all attention equally. Also, I did not force any of them into it," he said before she smiled and moved to sit on his lap. "Then I'm allowed to join and have some more fun with you?" she asked as she pressed her peach up against his lap before she squeaked as he wrapped his arms around her slim waist with a smile. "Oh, that sounds perfect," he said as he rubbed her stomach and kissed her neck softly. As they were enjoying themselves, Jules and Steve were watching the movie, not noticing of what was going on over at the hot tub due to being engrossed in the movie, while Steve not as much as he just wanted to leave but couldn't because Jules was holding him in place. Naruto slowly moved his hands up towards her chest as he slid his hands under her top to squeeze the high B-cup melons, making her let out a soft mm. "I know they aren't as big as some of the girls at school she said before she was cut off by Naruto turning her around so she faced him before kissing her deeply. "The size doesn't matter at all, Lindsay, let me show you why you're perfect just the way you are," he said as he started to softly squeeze her melons, making her softly. The feeling of his larger hands moving and caressing her modest melons was a new and very pleasurable feeling for Lindsay. Naruto then took Lindsay and turned her back around so her back was to him. He then pulled her so she was leaning against him as he wrapped his arms back around her slender waist. He smiled as she slowly started breathing faster and she gently started rocking on him, which with her very revealing swimsuit caused her tight peach to rub against his midsection. This had a very positive effect on Naruto as it caused his manhood to slowly grow more and more irked as the feeling of her wiggling in his lap continued. Not wanting to be the only one feeling vulnerable at this moment, he began to run his hands on her flat stomach, running his fingers around the rim of the bottom of her swimsuit. Lindsay started to blush more and more when feeling his growing irk and rubbing against her lower region that she can only imagine what it looks like. By each pass when rubbing against him, she was starting to get more turned on by how large it felt to her. "Tell me, Lindsay. I notice you like to tease some guys around school, but have you ever done anything with a male before?" Naruto asked as he leaned down so his mouth is right against her ear and she could feel his warm breath tickle her ear as his hands kept dancing around the thin layer of cloth separating his large hands from her womanhood. "And no, I haven't. I just do that so I can feel a bit of the rush, Lindsay said as he started to nibble on her ear, making her let out a soft squeak from the new sensations she was experiencing. Oh, so you never had a man touch you like this? Well, I am truly honored to be able to pleasure such a beauty like you. Naruto told her as he started to embrace on her neck while he took his hand and slid just the tip of his hands into her swimsuit. He smiled as his fingers stroked right where her big HR is located, and he could feel that there was some there, but it is cut down very close to the skin. He gently took his fingertips and started to pet the low-cut hair of her untouched maidenhood as she shivered from the sensation. A quivering came from Lindsay's lips as she feels someone touch a place on her body she never touched before. She always thought boys didn't like big HR since the few pornos she had seen the girls were always cleanly shaven, but the way Naruto was running his fingers through hers made her start to think that it was the wrong idea. He was treating her, kitty cat, up to its namesake and petting her over and over, almost making her purr. Her thought process of how good all of this was feeling for her was broken as she realized she had been letting out some loud moans. She quickly opened her eyes, which she didn't even know she closed, to see that Jewel and Steve didn't hear her. She would have died of embarrassment if her childhood friend heard her moaning like this, and she would have to literally, not figuratively, kill Steve for hearing her in this state. Did my little beauty get nervous that her friend heard her enjoying the pleasure a man was giving her? Naruto whispered to her with a grin as he quickly took his hand and moved it down through her big HR right over to her hooded CLT that, even though it was covered the STMLTN she has been undergoing, had slowly been changing that. Which? Now he was running his fingers stroking it directly, causing Lindsay to take a deep gasp at feeling for the first time someone other than her touching her womanhood in such a way. It seems that a lovely beauty like you seems to love playing in public. Does it excite you that you could be caught at any moment with what you have done in the past? Naruto had questioned as her skin tingled from the accusation before she felt her shift around as she realized that she was now facing the outdoor movie screen with Jules and Steve's backs facing towards them. And Naruto, they could see us at any moment. Lindsay said weakly in protest, but the way she continued to move her hips into his fingers said the exact opposite. She enjoyed teasing others because she knew she was attractive and got a level of enjoyment from seeing others flustered, even though up until this point she never had any plan on acting on those flirtatious moments. But now that she was the one being teased, she had to admit to herself that she was loving it. Now my little kitten, let's see what else we can do without getting caught, Naruto said as he slowly ran his fingers going lower and lower till he was running his fingers on her lower lips. As he continued to rub her, he knew all the wetness on them was not because of the water, due to how sticky it was as he did her. He enjoyed seeing her trying to hold in her moans so the others wouldn't hear her enjoying what he was doing to her. He wanted to do more and see how far he can push this little flirt until she was putty in his hands. Naruto then took her and lifted her off his lap and saw her look back at him with blinding lust and longing in her eyes, almost begging for her to take her seat again. She wasn't ready as he took her to the end of the hot tub facing the other two having his date in the yard and bent her over the rim, making her peach stick up in the air while she looked back at him with widened eyes from the shock of the positions she was now in. Naruto then moved closer to her and ran his hands up her legs and over her peach, which her rosebud was barely covered by the thin string of her swimsuit, and he ran his hand over her suit until he was rubbing her growing tender folds through her suit. I want to show you how much fun it is to be the one being teased, but don't worry, I will reward you if you do as I say, Naruto said as he leaned up to her and put his mouth against her ear. If my little beauty here pulls down those pesky bottoms you have on, right now while bent over, I will be sure to reward you. Just think, you would be facing those two as you reveal your appealing rear to me, and they would be none the wiser as I reward you, he told her as his lips moved against her ear while he was applying more and more force onto her increasingly aching PP through her suit. Lindsay's mind was running a mile a minute thinking about that this man has just said to her. He wants her to reveal herself, which that in and of itself would be major. No, he also want her to do it right here outside with her BF and her pervy date only a stone's throw away. That idea seems like the kind you would dismiss right then and there, but the feeling of him stroking her through her swimsuit felt so good, but not as good as when he was touching her directly. If she did what he said he would reward her, and she can only imagine what it might do. And to be honest, the idea of being pleasured with the risk of being caught was making her far more turned on than she ever really thought something so pervy could do to her. Lindsay didn't have to think much as she slowly reached up to her hips and pulled down her swimsuit bottom. She let a soft mmm out as she felt the slight cold air compared to the heat of the hot tub run across her bare bottom half, and then bent back over the tub and presented herself to Naruto as he just made her do something she never thought she would ever do. All while she did this, her eyes never left the other two in the yard, knowing they could turn around any second and see her with her bare peach waving in the air. Such a good girl. Just for that I think I'll give you the reward, Naruto said as he bent down so he could face her peach to get a better look at her. He couldn't help but chuckle when he saw a few freckle marks on her bare bottom and around her rosebud. He found it adorable as he had also saw some freckles spotted across her chest and melons. He stopped admiring her cute, bubble peach as he brought his hands towards her tight peach cheeks and started massaging them and occasionally squeezing them, getting Lindsay to mmm as she had to bite onto one of her fingers to try and quiet herself, which if anyone saw would think the sight to be very RTC. As he continued, he took one of his hands off of her peach cheeks and brought his hand to her lower lips and started caressing them as he got closer to them, his hot breath reaching the folds, making her squirm and spasm as he ran his fingers, softly grazing her now moistened lips. He felt himself harden up as the smell of her juices filled his nose, and he found he loved the scent of her as he couldn't help but think she smelled like jasmine. He then took his fingers and ran them from one end of her womanhood to the other, but didn't stop and kept going till he also ran his slightly glistening fingers over her twitching rosebud, causing her shoot her head up as a whimper escapes her lips, making her almost break the skin of her finger with the sudden jolt of her head. As he figured he had teased her enough, Naruto slowly took 2 fingers and slowly slid them into her and felt her virgin body tighten around his fingers. He was able to fit a good bit of his fingers inside of her until he hit her barrier and decided he wasn't going to break before he ran his fingers on it before he started to pump his fingers in and out of her, massaging every inch of her insides he could touch. The new piston movement taking place inside of Lindsay was godly to her. It was something she had never felt even during those lonely nights when she would use her little pink friend she had hidden under her bed, but it never felt this good. All of the feelings from his fingers wiggling around and stroking all her insides, the heat his fingers gave off, the knowing of the person doing this was doing it to give her pleasure felt so unreal. It was also increased due to the fact she was now panting while looking at her best friend on a date as she was getting fingered to the point of her wanting to burst, and this hot tube made her want it even more. Naruto was loving the feeling of her insides wrapped around his fingers. He then noticed her tight peach spasming slightly at him and he decided to have some more fun with her. So with his still wet hands from both the tub and her now overflowing PP, he took his thumb and ran it over her peach. He felt her jump and squeak, but she didn't move from her spot despite her shaking like a leaf. He grinned and slowly pushed his thumb in. He smirked as he saw her tilt her head back and seemed like she was about to give out a pleasure-filled scream before he put 2 of his fingers from his other hand in her mouth and run them on her tongue to keep her quiet. Lindsay's old habit kicked in as she was in her drunken lust-filled phase as she started to suck on his fingers, seeming like she was nursing and she couldn't get enough of tasting herself. She ran her tongue all over his fingers as he could feel her moaning against his fingers as he kept thrusting inside both her holes with his fingers and even made his fingers rub against each other inside of her. She wasn't even supporting herself anymore as her legs had gone limp and she was only up from leaning on the tub. Oh, looks like you really do like eating on things as you are being made to leak. Look at how much you are enjoying feeling my fingers in your mouth. It is almost like you wish it was something else filling your mouth. Maybe the same thing that you want to fill these holes my fingers are currently in right now. Naruto asked as he felt her start to suck with more intensity as she also started to throw her peach back against his hand. He guessed she wouldn't last much long from the spasms inside her PP and peach were anything to go by. Lindsay was at the end of her rope and couldn't take it anymore as she was about to release for the very first time in her life. She never could get this far with what toys she had back home in her room and was going to remember this experience for as long as she lived with what her newly realized FTSH. Naruto, knowing her release was coming, got ready, but he wanted to do something to the tea's conic eater before she finished. He smirked as he took his fingers and gripped her tongue before using them to pull her tongue out of her mouth. He smiled as he used his fingers to hold her tongue out of her mouth and massage it as she drooled on herself with her eyes twitching from the pleasure and the taste of him that she was starting to get addicted to. She couldn't take it anymore as she was in a very pervy pose with all her holes being toyed and played with by this man as she felt her pleasure rising to a point where she felt like she was going to PSS herself. She loved him toying with her tongue, playing with her pee-pee, and even playing with her peach. As a few more seconds passed she met her breaking point. And thankfully due to him holding her tongue she was kept from letting out an incredibly loud mmm and scream as she spasmed and came all over herself and his hands. It felt like her body clamped down on everything he put inside of her to keep them from leaving as she climaxed. Even as she came it was an incredible show. She leaked out with her pee-pee twitching as the juices poured out of her in a stream between her legs and down Naruto's arms, but they didn't stop him from pumping in her until her orgasm finished. After she had stopped he brought her back down into the hot tub to steady herself and he had let her lean into him so that she could relax from her first time experience of leaking. Her mind was in a total daze as she felt that her SXL high was never going to drop. Naruto turned her head over as he kissed her deeply, giving her another taste of him so that her SXL high could stay active just a little bit longer. The two had rested until the movie came to an end. At that time, Lindsay was starting to come to her senses as she remembering every feeling she had experienced earlier and couldn't help but blush. Thankfully Naruto had slipped her bikini bottoms back up as she exited the hot tub. While Naruto got changed, Lindsay started to down several bottles of water to rehydrate herself after being in the hot tub for so long and from her CLMX earlier. She had dried herself off and put back on her clothes by the time that Naruto exited his changing room. As the date was officially over Naruto helped the girls into his car and once Jules and Lindsay were in Steve quickly ran out of the backyard and back to his home in relief after getting away from Jules. He hoped that this would score him points with the ladies at school but Naruto knew he still had a long way to go. Naruto had taken Jules home first, with Lindsay's directions, and she had thanked Naruto for the ride and for the date with Steve before she headed back inside for the night. Once at Lindsay's place, Naruto had to help support her to her doorway since her legs were still out of it from what happened earlier. "I've had a really great time tonight, Naruto. I've really got to thank Lisa for this opportunity and I'll let her know on what I think on all of this with possibly joining," she said as she went up and kissed Naruto on the lips before slipping in her tongue into his mouth, loving the taste of him. After a few minutes of their deep embrace, Lindsay broke away and entered her home before giving Naruto a flirty wink. Naruto smiled as he went back to his car and hoped that her parents weren't angry at him for bringing her home so late as it was a little past midnight. Thankfully today was only Saturday. He felt his phone buzz as he pulled it from his pocket to see it was Hailey as he answered it. "Hey Hailey, how's your mother doing?" he asked as he frowned at the silence on the other end. "Hailey, what's wrong?" "My dad did something stupid again and I need your help really badly," she said with a worried tone in her voice. "Of course Hailey, I'll come over right now," he said as she let out a relieved sigh. "Thanks, this is really bothersome." "Thank you so much, I honestly feel like you are the only one I can rely on," she said as he chuckled. "That's what I strive for Hailey," he said as he started his car. "I'll let you know what's going on once you get over here since it is really confusing." "See you when you get here," she said as she hung up. He grew a bit curious and worried about what happened to Francine. He hoped it wasn't anything serious but with Stan as the cause of literally anything could have happened with that man's stupidity. Well, it can't be that bad, he thought as he drove off to the Smith's household. Smith's house. Well, I was half right, he thought as he pinched the bridge of his nose as Hailey told him what had happened to Francine. "Wait. Why are you here? Why did you all let him in?" Stan asked as he pointed at Naruto as Roger wasn't even trying to hide. "Relax Stan, he met me earlier today and he didn't freak out at all. Hell, he gave me all of these nice clothes to help me hide in public." Oh, thanks by the way, Naruto, Roger said as he twirled around in some casual male clothes with even a black wig. What do you mean he knows of you? This is serious trouble, Stan said while freaking out as Naruto groaned. Relax, Stan, maybe worry about the wife you mind-wiped into a teenager. Naruto yelled as he narrowed his eyes at Stan before he looked down at Francine as she slept on the couch. It's not my fault, I just tried to keep her from getting mad at me, Stan said as Hailey held his hand to keep him from punching Stan. It was your fault for being an idiot and forgetting your anniversary again and then deciding to mind-wipe her instead of owning up to your actions, he yelled as Stan took a step back before Naruto ran his hand through his hair. Okay, so she believes she is a teen again, so we need to get her into her old house or apartment back then until her mind goes back to normal. If you can give me a few hours I can get this settled, he said as Stan rose an eyebrow at him. Oh, and you have the ability to do so? Stan asked, not really believing that the blonde man in front of him could do any help. I know people that owe me some favors. I can get everything set up if you give me at max 2 hours, he said as he pulled out his phone and dialed a number before resting it against his shoulder. Hailey, help me get Francine to my car and we can drive her old apartment. Wait, I'm not going to let you take my wife without me allowing it, Stan said before he backed away from the furious look in the blonde kid's eyes. You caused this, so if you want her to go back to normal, I suggest backing off and letting someone who is a friend of Francine worry about getting her back to normal, he said before turning to his phone as Roger opened the door while he held Francine's feet while Hailey got her torso. Once at the car, Naruto opened up his back door to properly put Francine in. As this was going on, he had dialed his phone and waited for the other person to pick up. Hello, I need a little favor, he said as he and Hailey carefully laid Francine in his back seat. Yeah, I know I will owe you again just after I repaid you, but this is for a friend of mine after her husband wiped the last 20 years of her memory away, he said as he nodded. Yes, I'm serious, her husband is that stupid, he said as the person on the other end let out a loud laugh. That's fine, just get me the apartment of one Francine Lingsmith back when she was 20 years younger. Take the money out of my account to put the person living there in a proper hotel until this blows over. Not like one of those cockroach motels like you did last time but, he said as he let out a sigh of relief. Thank you so much. We will need it cleared out by the morning since she won't be able to stay asleep for very long, he said before he hung up the phone. Come on Hailey, we need to get moving, he said as she nodded and got into his car. Hey Roger, I'm sorry I couldn't stay long but I will be back later in the week as I have some more clothes for you, he said as Roger smiled and nodded. Thanks again Naruto, Roger said as he waved them while they pulled out of the driveway. Do you think she will be able to remember herself or anything from the last 20 years? Hailey asked as they drove away from her home. I don't know for sure, there are several cases of memory loss of the patients getting back their memories after having a specific trigger to cause it, but with CIA technology being the cause of the memory loss it might be a bit more suppressed, he said as he sighed. But we can have hope, your mom is a strong woman after all. Yeah, let's just get her to the apartment and hopefully this doesn't take too long, Hailey said as he nodded and continued to drive towards their destination. West Langley Falls Apartments, morning. Naruto let out a tired sigh as they had finished getting the apartment to somewhat standard conditions of a teenage girl back in the 80s, and of course both Hailey and Naruto didn't know what teenage Francine was into back then, so they just plastered the walls with everything 80s related from music bands, films, the works. They even had to dress Francine up in 80s attire of clothing from a loose midriff pink t-shirt, skin-tight violet pants, a gaudy white belt and white high-heeled shoes. With her hair they didn't know what she had as a teenager, so they just frizzled her hair up to make it appear to be bed hair. As with accessories they just gave her some loose bracelets and a pendant Hailey had on her. Of course Hailey was the one that actually changed her as he had just gathered the clothes for her. So you will have to be her roommate to keep an eye on her, he said as Hailey nodded and sat on the recliner as he nodded. Then what are you going to be? She asked as he chuckled and leaned close to her. She smiled as he kissed her softly. I'm going to be your boyfriend that crashes with you guys, he said as Hailey giggled and was about to say something until they both heard Francine waking up. Who are you two? She asked with a yawn as Hailey stood up with a worried look. Hi. I'm your new roommate, Hailey, and this is my boyfriend Naruto. Hailey said as Naruto waved at her. Wow, you're really hot, you know that? Francine said as Naruto widened his eyes a bit before Francine sauntered over to him and trailed her finger down his chest until Hailey pulled him back. I must have blacked out from last night's rager, can't seem to remember a thing. Francine said as she continued to look at him with a bit of drool coming out of her lips. Wait a second, you party? Hailey surprisingly asked. This was totally new to learn of her mom was a partier. Totally. Wow, I need to shower, Francine said as she smelled herself before frowning. You wanna join me hot stuff? She asked as he chuckled and shook his head before she went off into the bathroom. Well, too bad, would have had some fun. Maybe later when your girl calms down, a THRSM can be fun, she said as she closed the door. Great Grizzly Adams. Who fired the gardener? Francine yelled from the bathroom as Hailey buried her face as Naruto chuckled. Unbelievable. How the hell did she ever hook up with a stiff like Dad? Hailey asked as she sat down on the couch before he sat next to her and wrapped his arm over her shoulder with a shrug. Don't know for sure, maybe your dad could shed some light on that tidbit, Naruto added in. For now I don't know what to do without a bit more info. I could look up things on her past to help out the process, but it'd feel a bit weird, stalkerish weird. Naruto said as Hailey nodded as she understood. Afternoon, open road. Naruto sighed as he and Hailey hadn't gotten much sleep due to Francine's situation while he, Hailey and Francine were currently driving through a back road as they were following Stan's somewhat worrisome plan. Hey, old lady. Party. Francine yelled as she stood up in his car before he sped off past the light. Wow, learning more than I ever wanted to know, Hailey muttered as they continued their drive as she sat next to Naruto. You say something? Francine asked to her new roommate as she relaxed in this ride she had described as bitchin' when she first saw it. No, nothing, Francine. Nothing at all. Hailey said before the earpiece hidden in her ear went off. This is upstanding conservative to dirty liberal. Drop point ahead. Stan said to Hailey over her headpiece as she shook her head on what her codename is she had gotten from her dad. Hailey shook her head, ignoring her dad as she tapped Naruto's shoulder to let him know the supposed designated drop point was coming. When the two had heard from Stan on how he had met Francine the first time and winning her over, they had to shake their heads in disbelief. It was basically that Stan met Francine while she was hitchhiking when he picked her up. While they drove he accidentally ran over a raccoon, and put it out of its misery by killing it by shooting it in the face. It seemed Francine back then was a bit messed up for how she ended up with Stan all because of that moment, but they knew she was different compared to how she was as a mother. Of course they had to recreate the moment on how Francine met Stan and fell for him to hopefully trigger her memories to come back, so they had little to no choice in the matter, so they had to comply, even though Naruto doubted it would actually work. Hey, Francine. Mind if you check the back tire? I think the car is running kind of low, could be a flat. Hailey said as they slowed to a stop. Yeah sure, just pull on over, Francine said as she hopped out through the passenger window. Once she was out, Naruto had stepped on the gas and left Francine in the dust. What the hell? You crazy bstrd. I love you. You got me. Francine screamed to Naruto as he drove his car to the distance. Naruto felt horrible for ditching Francine as she was his friend and the mother of a love interest of his. He looked over to Hailey and she was probably feeling the same way in a sense with what they had done as they continued down the road until they were out of sight. She'll be fine, we can follow Stan in case something goes wrong and we can pick her up again if she runs off, he said as Hailey nodded before they pulled over. And boy was he grateful that they stayed behind as Stan had ruined his plan by missing the raccoon. Sure, he did go out of his car like planned to see if it was dead, but it was still alive, and to make matters worse Stan tried to kill the innocent creature that had proceeded to get into a massive and destructive chase that ended in an explosion. Surprisingly, the raccoon survived by God knows how. I swear he's an idiot, don't know if he'll give me an aneurysm one day with his stupidity, he said out loud as he drove to catch up with Francine, who laughed as she got back into the back seat. You totally got me, you too, she said with a laugh as she jumped into the car. That was a really good one, but you have to watch out, there are some crazy people out here, she said as she told them of the chase with Stan again. Yeah, we noticed. I am so sorry on all that. Hailey wanted to josh with you for a moment there before coming right back for you. Didn't realize that it was a mistake. I'm very glad you are safe though, he said with a frown as they drove back to the apartment. Unknown to the two, Francine had been touched by Naruto's worry and was feeling something she never felt before. It felt like she had found something she had been missing, but she couldn't put her finger on it. All she could say about it was that she did not want to ever let it go. Apartment. Naruto laid down on the couch in the living room with a sigh as Hailey laid on his chst while Francine was blaring music in her room while they could smell pot being smoked in her room. Your mom is really intense, he said with a chuckle as Hailey nodded and chuckled at him. Yeah, tell me about it. It kind of sucks that all this happened. I kind of wanted to spend some alone time with you, Hailey said as she kissed him softly while he placed his hands on her back and slowly moved them to make her feel better. He smiled as he kissed her back. Well, we can always relax while Francine is busy, he said as he leaned in for another embrace. Room for one more, a voice said behind them, causing the two to let out a yelp and fall off the couch. After realizing how they fell with Naruto on top of Hailey and one of his hands were on her BRST, accidentally giving it a squeeze that made Hailey bite her lip before he quickly got up from her, not knowing that Hailey wanted more of it. When looking behind them, they saw Francine in just her underwear with one of her BR straps hanging loosely. It gave Naruto a better look of Francine underneath her clothes, of having a clearer view of her supple body, of her E-cup melons, long toned legs, slim waist, and if she had turned around her firm peach. "Mo Francine, what are you doing? Put some clothes back on." Hailey stuttered, seeing her mother dressed like this and being so revealing to her fake boyfriend. Hell, she didn't even know of Francine back then being so loose. "Oh, I just wanted to say hi, get it," she said with a giggle before she smiled down at them. "Also wanted to get some air after that nice joint." Also wanted to do this," Francine said in her high state as her smile grew a bit bigger. "Do-a-dash," Naruto said before he was interrupted when Francine pulled him in for a very deep embrace as she snaked her tongue into his mouth and grabbed his hand and pressed it against her BRST. Hailey was frozen in shock of seeing this happening, her mother kissing her love interest as it had shut down her mind for a bit before it started back up again. "Well, what are you doing to my boyfriend?" Hailey said as she separated the two from the embrace, leaving a long saliva thread from their mouths as Francine's BRST had been pulled out from Hailey, pulling Naruto away. "I just wanted to say thanks for earlier and give my appreciation," Francine said as Hailey quickly pulled the BR strap back up, covering her mom's BRST before the dazed Naruto could see it. "Oh, seems that you wanted that appreciation as well. Well, there is room for one more," Francine said as she pulled Hailey into an embrace as well, leaving her in shock. And when Naruto got out of his shocked state, he came onto a very very hot sight of Francine and a madly blushing Hailey kissing, causing Naruto's mind to shut back down again with the image burnt into his head. Seems he passed back out, but someone is awake," Francine said with a giggle as she broke the embrace with a saliva trail. She then walked over to Naruto and poked the tent raising from his pants. "Stop it. He's my boyfriend, so I'll deal with it," Hailey yelled as she quickly left the daze she had been in from her mother's embrace before she pushed her mom back into her room and stared at Naruto as he was still passed out, standing up. "Well, I am going to join his group, so I maybe should make it official," Hailey muttered out as she walked over to him and made him sit down on the couch as she stared at the bulge in his pants and gathered her nerves as she pulled his pants down. Hailey stared in shock as she saw the foot-long member in front of her as it had somewhat hit her in the face after she had pulled down his boxers. "Holy F," He's huge, Hailey wondered out loud as she wrapped both of her hands around it on top of each other and found that even then half of it was still visible. She steeled her nerves as she ate it around the tip of it and moaned as she ate up the pre-juice that was collecting at the top and found how delicious it tasted to her. She slowly stuck more and more of it deeper into her mouth as she grew thankful that she had trained away her GG reflex before she swallowed 10 inches of it in her mouth before tears built up in her eyes from her not being able to breathe. As she pulled out back she shivered from the intense feeling it gave her. She smiled as she started to lick it from base to tip until it was entirely covered in her saliva before she shoved it back into her mouth. After a few seconds she got used to it as she started to bob her head back and forth, eating every inch that she could as it went in and out of her mouth. Oh God, it takes up my whole throat, Hailey thought as she slid her hand under her pants and underwear as she started to shove 2 of her fingers into her dripping wet pee-pee. I can't wait until this massive pee-pee screws my brains out, she thought as she started to bob her head faster while she shoved her fingers deeper in her as she was now sopping wet from the thoughts of him having sex with her was driving her crazy. Unknown to Hailey, Francine's door was cracked open as she watched her roommate blow her boyfriend's massive pee-pee that was a whole foot long. God, she is so lucky. I want a taste of that, Francine thought as she fingered her own pee-pee like her roommate was, as well as she had caused a puddle to form under her from how wet she actually was. Hailey let out a mmm while his pee-pee was still in her mouth as her fingers had hit her G-spot as well as the pee-pee in her mouth had started to throb. Please leak, I want a taste so badly, she thought as started to suck even faster and harder on it while she made sure to swallow all 12 inches of it, causing her eyes to roll back a bit. She kept at it until she heard Naruto groan a bit before she was surprised as he suddenly came, causing juices to shoot down her throat and fill up her mouth as she struggled to swallow it faster than it was shooting out and filling up her mouth. The sensation of him filling up her stomach caused her to have a breathtaking orgasm as her juices sprayed all over her pants and panties before after a minute or so he had stopped leaking. She let his pee-pee pop out of her mouth as her stomach was entirely full from his salty and sweet juices as she ate up any remains from his tip before he started to stir and wake up before she quickly moved to next to him, but before she could put his pee-pee away he had woken up. Oh man, what hit me? All I remember was something really incredible had happened and then nothing, Naruto muttered with a daze as he turned to see Hailey right next to him. Well, you could probably thank Francine for that with her doing something that I don't want to talk about right now that got you to black out, Hailey said, hoping that Naruto wouldn't remember a thing on what he saw. Oh well, I guess so, Naruto said as he stood up and felt a slight chill in his lower region and looked down and saw his pee-pee was hanging out with some saliva dripping off of it and some small traces of his juices. Hailey. Why is my pee-pee out? Naruto wearily asked since he was confused of what happened during his blackout. The thing that caused Francine to make you to black out, well, it left you very irked and I needed to fix it before Francine tried. So I ended up eating it, she said nervously before she blushed and wiped her mouth as a bit of juices leaked out. Oh. Well, thank you Hailey, I guess. I'm going to head out now and check on things later, so bye, Naruto said as he tucked in his pee-pee and zipped up his pants before he left the apartment. Hailey looked down in shame as she frowned at the floor. He is probably upset that I took advantage of him and did such a thing. He probably hates me, she thought as she wiped her tears that slowly poured out of her eyes before she decided to change her clothes due to how wet they were. Naruto let out a sigh as he leaned against the door. He was confused by what just happened. He never experienced anything like that before. He didn't know what to do to get things cleared up with her since this was something that was out of their control. It wasn't like he hated her anything since it wasn't like she raped him or anything. If anything, it surprised him since he thought Hailey had wanted to take things slow. I need to take a breath and calm down after I come back tomorrow since Tiffany is still coming home later tonight, he thought as he ran his hand through his hair and headed to his car while numerous thoughts ran through his head. Still unknown to the two, Francine had seen the whole thing of what happened after she had came from watching the two, and she had seen the entire act that she wished she had experienced that instead of her roommate. She felt horrible for what happened to them both, of Hailey taking slight advantage of her boyfriend and Naruto freaking out a bit because of it. She hoped things would be okay between the two and maybe apologize to them both when things are in a better mood. Of course, for now she probably needs to take a cold shower to cool herself off and clean up all the juices that had covered a corner of her door frame and the floor around it. Several hours later. After a few hours and hearing from Tiffany that she was staying at her friend's house to catch up since she had just returned to Langley Falls, Naruto had come back to the apartment to check up on things and to apologize to Hailey for leaving like that and leaving it as awkward as it was. When he entered the apartment he frowned as it was being trashed with bottles of beer everywhere with a lot of complete strangers running around. He didn't pay much attention to his surroundings as he pushed his way through the people that crowded the living room until he found the one person he wanted to talk to. "And Naruto, what are you doing back here?" Hailey asked as she was going around the apartment, picking up empty beer bottles before she ran into her crush. "Well, I needed to come back here and check on Francine and see how she is doing," Naruto said with a nervous cough as Hailey looked away from him. "I also wanted to come back to talk to you of what happened earlier and sorry on how I acted before I left. Sorry if I gave the impression if I was mad at you or anything of the sort. I just never experienced anything like that of that kind of situation before and it threw me off badly. Normally I'm the one being in the lead," he said as Hailey still looked away in shame. "But I took advantage of you, Naruto. Shouldn't you be mad or something?" she asked as he awkwardly chuckled. "Hailey, you already know I care for you a lot and I know you feel the same. We have made out several times and you know of my situation. I sort of already consider you in the group at least halfway, so there isn't much to apologize for," he said as he kissed her softly as she wrapped her arms around his neck with a smile while she let out a few tears that were building up. "So can we move past all this, please? I don't want this to hinder our relationship as it already has been. Besides, I really hate to see you like this," he said as he stroked her cheek softly. "Now where is that appealing smile that got me to fall for you?" Naruto asked as Hailey giggled a little before she started to smile. "There it is," he said as he trailed kisses on her neck that made her giggle more and smile. "So off topic, but what in the world happened here?" Naruto asked as he looked around and saw the damaged apartment that was going to be a pain to fix before the original renter came back. "Sorry, but Francine decided to throw a rager," she said before Naruto pulled her away as a football had flew right past her hitting the wall behind her. "Phew, close one," Naruto said as he frowned as he looked to see who had thrown it. "Party foul. Consume," Francine said before she spotted Naruto and Hailey together. "Oh hey Naruto, Hailey," Francine said giggling as she walked over to them before she kind of looked nervous. "Are you two all better now? I heard a bit of a fight earlier today and was a bit worried," she said as the two of them blushed, wondering how much she actually heard. "Yeah, we're fine now. It was just a misunderstanding," he said as Hailey smiled and kissed his cheek again. "Groovy. I'm going to get a beer," Francine said as she quickly went back to her party mood. "Well, at least she didn't hear it all," he whispered to her as Hailey grew darker red before they moved over to the couch to relax. Things calmed down a bit before an hour or so later the door flung open as Stan walked through with an annoyed look. "Hailey, where is your mother?" Stan asked, not caring for the door he nearly broke off its hinges. "Last time I saw her, she was in the kitchen serving up body shots," Hailey said as she sighed remembering how she tried to give one to Naruto. "What a hostess," Stan said as the three of them headed towards the kitchen and looked around until they frowned. "She's not here," Naruto said as he couldn't see Francine anywhere and with the way she acted it normally wasn't strong to miss her. "There's a note in frosting on the fridge," Stan said as he started to read it. "Hailey. Me and Jeff went to Burning Man together. Rock on. Francine. Wait, when did Jeff show up in the first place?" Hailey said. "Don't know, he could have snuck in while you weren't looking earlier," Naruto said with a chuckle as he leaned down to her. "We were making out pretty HRD on the couch before Stan arrived," he told her as she gave his arm a playful slap. Well anyways, he said. As he frowned at the note, we should get going then before they get too far, he said as he and Hailey headed towards the door. Where do you think you're going, Naruto? Stan asked as he grabbed Naruto's shoulder. I don't know, Burning Man, to actually try for find Francine, and besides, what are you doing here in the first place, Stan? Naruto said. Well, I think I have a better way to get her memories back, Stan said as Naruto rolled his eyes. Right, like of what you did earlier with trying to kill a raccoon. Yeah, like that would work. Naruto said as he figured Francine must have been on some drag back then, since that mercy killing would never have worked. This time is different, I just know how I can snap her out of all of this. Stan said as he started to pull them to the door. Whatever, but if anything goes wrong it's all on you, not me, Naruto said. Hours later. Naruto and Hailey groaned as they were riding in the back seat of Stan's car because of how they were so tired from all this mess, and Stan still felt responsible for what happened. Stan had ended up driving all the way to Burning Man after running back to the Smith's residence to gather a few things for the trip. In the back seat, Hailey was slightly dozing off as she leaned against Naruto's chest as he kissed the top of her head. The Sandman's starting to goose me. Stan grumbled as Naruto pulled out a thermos. Here, have some coffee, he said as he pulled off the detachable cup and started pouring some coffee for Stan before a goldfish slipped out of the thermos and into the cup. Klaus. What in the world are you doing here? Stan asked, confused, as Klaus smirked at them. Then you come home and pack. I heard you, Hailey and Naruto talking about this Burning Man. So, I says to main self, road trip, he said with a smile before he frowned at Stan. Stan, by the way, I could not hold main PP, Klaus admittedly said as Stan choked on his drink before spitting it out as Naruto started laughing strong in the back. As they reached their destination, the four ended up wandered around Burning Man for several hours. Naruto had brought Klaus along in a mini water bowl so that Klaus wouldn't be left behind, since Naruto still thought Klaus as a human being. He was only inside of an animal, and being left behind in a car would probably be considered animal cruelty. Stan, we've been searching all night. Let's just start fresh in the morning. Naruto suggested with a frown as he could see Hailey was about to fall down before he caught her and picked her up in a bridal carry. Stan chose to ignore him as he kept on shouting out for Francine everywhere they went, and he knew Stan could only keep going for so long. I'm not just saying this to be clever, but I really feel like a fish out of water here, Klaus had said. Naruto chuckled as he helped Klaus settle on Hailey's stomach since she was resting in his arms. Stan frowned and sat down once they came to a giant fire pit, deciding to take a rest before continuing their search for Francine. So what's the deal with the flower? Hailey asked as Naruto set her and Klaus down. On our wedding day, I placed this yellow flower in your mom's white bouquet. It symbolized her sunshine brightening my otherwise cloudy world. Stan said as he stared glumly at the flower. Dad, I've never seen this side of you. It's so sweet. Hailey said as her eyes widened slightly. Yeah, well, that's a surprising act out of character for you. Naruto muttered as Hailey and Klaus agreed with a silent nod. Yes, well, if you tell anybody, I'll kill you. Stan said as Hailey laughed a bit before Stan went into a serious face, interrupting the laughter. I'm serious. I will kill you. I will reach into your chest, pull out your beating heart, and eat it. All of it. Every last bit, he finished as Hailey sat there creeped out and in shock by how far her dad would do to keep that sensitive side of him out from people's knowledge. Well, sweet dreams, angel. Stan said as he laid down to fall asleep. Wow, just wow. I think it's best if we move further away from him for the night, Naruto suggested as Hailey nodded as she smiled up at him while he offered her a hand. Want to join me? He asked as Hailey nodded and accepted his hand before they went to a different area. After finding a different bonfire to lay down and relax, Hailey scooted close to Naruto and leaned against him after feeling so tired from a very long day. Night, Naruto, she muttered out as he wrapped his arms around her with a smile. "Night, Hailey," he said as they both drifted off to sleep. Morning. As the sun peeked out from behind the mountains, Naruto groggily started to wake up due to it hitting his face. He felt a weight on his body as he tried to sit up and peered down to see Hailey laying on top of him still fast asleep. Their legs were tied together during their sleep and Hailey was resting her head onto the crook of his neck, giving out soft breaths onto his skin, making him smile warmly at her. Naruto smiled as Hailey in her sleep was just as appealing, if not more appealing than she normally was from the peaceful look on her face. He wanted to keep her in her peaceful state, but he knew they needed to get up. Naruto gently lifted up Hailey's head towards him before he gave her a soft morning embrace to wake her up gently, and also because he loved her lips. Hailey smiled in her sleep as she was still enjoying her dream of just her and Naruto. It had started with them dating for several years. He then popped the question. The two then started to get married, and just as the two had started to share a gentle, loving embrace to consummate their marriage, the dream had started to end. As she was coming out of the dream, she smiled as she felt the sensation of Naruto's soft and gentle lips onto her own, and once realizing her dream had ended, making her wish she was still in it, but she was busy enjoying the nice wake-up embrace. Not a bad way to wake up, Naruto. You know how to make a girl happy, Hailey said before she kissed Naruto again, wanting to continue the early morning sensation. Well, I aim to please, my dear, he said before kissing her one more time. Well, I can see you had a very nice sleep with how you're clinging on to me. Hailey was a bit confused before she looked down on their prone bodies to see how close she was to him and her legs tangled with his before Hailey couldn't help but blush as she felt a feeling of accomplishment. She was actually able to sleep with Naruto, not after SEC but actually sleeping next to him, and it felt great to her and she definitely would have to do it again, but now she knew she had to get up. As they slowly got up and noticed that everyone was littered on the ground sleeping in various positions, with some positions that the two didn't even want to see ever again. They quickly remembered the reason for being here was to search for Francine, but they needed to find Stan first. They continued to search until they heard someone yell out. "Ah, Mr. Smith," a familiar voice yelled out as Hailey groaned as she knew who it was. After they headed towards where they thought the voice yelled out from, Naruto and Hailey were able to spot Stan, and apparently someone both of them know of pretty well as Jeff, Hailey's ex-boyfriend. "Where's my wife?" Stan said angrily as he held Jeff up by the collar of his short. "She ditched me as soon as we got here. I just ran away with her to hopefully get a rise out of Hailey. Please don't kill me," Jeff yelled as he squirmed in Stan's grip. "Let me get this straight. You ran away with my memory-erased mother to a pagan festival just to get my attention?" Hailey questioned with growing anger in her tone as she drew closer to Jeff and her father. "Did it work?" Jeff said, hopefully thinking Hailey would get back to him. Yes, you did. I see now on how bad of a man-child you really are. Never working for an honest day in your life, being a total slob, and you still living in that trash heap you call a van. I would have looked past all that before, but now I just realize how worthless you are," Hailey said as she kept stabbing his chest with her finger, making him flinch every time she poked with more strength on each one. "But to top it all off, you basically kidnapped my mother in hopes of me getting back with you. You cannot be more sorely mistaken. You, Jeff Fisher, are done. We are done. Get out of my sight and never come back to me ever again," Hailey said as she pushed Jeff back before he ran off to God knows where. As Hailey was taking in deep breaths after her rant before feeling a hand on her shoulder, she turned and saw Naruto smiling gently at her. "You did good there, Hailey, and I'm very proud of you," he said, getting her to smile happily as she pulled his head down and gave Naruto a deep, passionate embrace that she enjoyed more than normal due to her now officially moving on from that deadbeat of an ex-boyfriend and getting together with this perfect man in front of her. After their intense make-out session was done, the group continued their search after they quickly made sure to find Klaus since they couldn't find him once they woke up. The group ended up easily finding him in a water cooler nearby after he was screaming for someone to get him out of the cold. After saving Klaus from freezing over, they quickly resumed their search. The group passed by one of the various music stages at the event and were about to continue onwards until something piqued their interest as they neared a stage. "And this hot piece of mama's coming with us," the singer on stage announced as Stan, Naruto, and Hailey looked towards the stage. See Francine drunk off her peach and hugging the announcer for support. "I am ripped off my ass," Francine said as she took another chug from her beer bottle before jumping off the stage, and crowd surfed for a bit before falling to the ground. "Francine!" Naruto yelled as they rushed over to her to make sure she was okay. As she got up, she took a glance at Stan. "You again," she said, clearly annoyed as she glared at Stan. "Look at what I have," Stan said as he pulled out a yellow flower from his suit before grasping his hands in a begging tone. "Remember. Please, remember." Francine picked the flower from Stan's hands, giving it a thoughtful look, with Stan giving off a hopeful one until Francine just tossed the flower into her mouth and ate it, crushing his hopes. "So how long till it kicks in?" she said as Stan fell to the group in shock. "Oh Francine, for God's sake. We're married. You love me," Stan pleaded once again as he shakily stood up. "Look, you're a stiff. I could never fall in love with a suit like you," Francine said, upset as she scoffed at him. "A suit like me? Well, then I'll get rid of the suit," Stan said as he rapidly started to undress. "Gah, my eyes!" Hailey yelled as she quickly covered up her eyes after her father took off his shirt and before he got to the pants. "Stan, what the hell? Put your clothes back on. I don't want to see your junk, and neither does Hailey." Naruto yelled as he covered her face more by bringing it to his chest, which Hailey didn't mind since more time with the very comfortable chest. It was another score for Hailey. "Ha. Ha. Look at me, nothing stiff here," Stan said in a smiling tone. "Yeah, especially your PP, you PP, a random, passing hippie said before going away, ruining Stan's mood for a second. "Hey. It's never going to happen with us. Never," Francine yelled as she chugged more of her beer before heading off. Unknown to the group, a hang-gliding man was distracted over his phone and taking a smoke before he crashed onto the Burning Man statue, causing it to fall down and light up in flames. Francine ended up where the statue had fell, causing the group to yell out, "Francine!" As Stan ran over to one of the portable potties to get changed, Naruto let go of Hailey for a moment before he rushed over to Francine to help save her from the burning wreckage. After saving her, he quickly carried her bridal style before he and Hailey ran over to the nearest medical tent there was, which was labeled as the Dave Chappelle Freakout tent. Stan came back to the wreckage hoping to find and save Francine until he spotted Hailey running into a tent a bit farther away. Once setting Francine down on one of the medical beds, Naruto quickly started administering CPR to get Francine to start breathing again. After a little bit into the session, Francine woke up in a tired groan before turning over to the opposite side, emptying her stomach a few times before it stopped. "Francine, are you okay?" Naruto asked in a sigh of relief before Francine looked over to her savior and was happy to see her roommate and her boyfriend. "Naruto, you saved me." "Thank you," she said weakly, making Naruto and Hailey let out a massive sigh of relief. "Well, that's what friends are for, Francine. Glad that you are safe," Naruto said as Francine blushed a bit before Stan barreled into the tent screaming. "Francine! Are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere else?" Stan asked quickly as he panted in exhaustion from rushing to get changed and then rushing to the wreck to find Francine not in danger. "Yes, she is, Stan, but she hit her head, and with that I don't know if she'll remember anything now," Naruto said as Stan had his head down in defeat. "Okay, I just wanted her to be safe. She's the best thing that ever happened to me and I took it for granted. I'm just happy that I got the privilege to be with you for the time that I did," Stan said as he walked up to her closer. "I love you, Francine. It's a little late, but happy anniversary," Stan said, holding back a few tears as he kissed her cheek before leaving. Francine went into a slight daze as the crash had shaken things up in her head before she passed out a bit and saw a raccoon telling her to remember. Shortly after that, various memories came rushing back to her for what felt like years. There were good and the bad memories mixed in. She remembered her years being with Stan and raising both of her children, Steve and Hailey. But the last ones she started to remember were the ones of her friendship and relationship with Naruto. She recalled him being there for her for the past several weeks, him helping her out ever since he moved into the neighborhood, and her growing feelings for the blonde man that she struggled to come to terms with but knew they were very much there. He made such an impact on her, adding all that to her new memories of what happened in the past several days made them even stronger. Stan. Francine said as Stan stopped as he turned back to her and called out her name hopefully. Stan, it was so weird, and I was alone and confused. And there was this raccoon, and I knew who I was again, she said as Stan hugged her, releasing some of his tears from his eyes. Oh, Francine, thank God. I love you, Stan said happily. I love you, too. She said before she ended up throwing up into Stan's face. He wiped the gunk off before he hugged her again. On the side, Hailey and Naruto were happy on seeing the touching moment and were glad that Francine had gotten her memories back. He had just wished it could have been through better, less life-endangering circumstances, but as the saying went, beggars couldn't be choosers. Smith's residence, night. After a long day getting back to Langley Falls, Naruto had to call his friend that he first called earlier about the apartment that they were done with it and could go back to normal but was a bit of a wreck. He already knew he would be charging him extra to fix up the place before the renter could return. Thanks for looking after me, you two. I'm so embarrassed on what I did for the past few days, Francine said with a slight blush as the group walked up to the front door. Don't be, you were fun. In fact, you were cool, Hailey said as Stan opened the door and went inside first. Yeah, it was interesting to see what you were like when you were younger, Francine, Naruto said with a laugh as he never expected her to be that wild. Still, thanks for everything, Naruto, and I really appreciate for what you did to help me and Mom as of late, Hailey said as she went up to him and gave him a gentle embrace. Well, I was wondering if that option of being your boyfriend was still available instead of being your fake boyfriend. If so, then can we go out on another date sometime soon? He asked as Hailey lit up in joy and jumped on him and gave him a deep embrace which he quickly returned. Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes, she said in between the kisses before she got off him, still beaming in joy. Well, let me know when you're available in the morning and we can see from there, he said as Hailey went inside of her home before giving one more embrace to him. That is very sweet of you, Naruto, and glad that things had turned out well for you too, Francine said as Naruto smiled at her. Well, I care for her very much, Francine, and wouldn't do a thing to make her upset. I actually wanted to ask her out sooner but never had the time, he said before he noticed Francine moving closer to him. Good to know, Naruto, but I still need to reward you on being so kind to me and my daughter for these past several weeks, she said before him close to her and giving him a soft, nervous embrace that shocked him. She smirked at him as she broke away and headed towards her house. By the way, Naruto, I think our previous embrace was much better, she said with a nervous smile before she gave him a slight wave. Have a good night, Naruto, she said as quickly went inside and closed her door. He stood there for a bit before realizing that Francine remembered everything from her teenage experience. Oh God, things are going to get crazy, aren't they? He thought as he ran his hand through his hair as he too had remembered what had happened due to her embrace, making him remember the 2 kisses the Francine had given him and Hailey. Well, can't say I don't like crazy, he thought as he got back into his car, wondering what exactly was in the future for him and Francine. Unknown to Naruto, after Francine had closed the door, she quickly started to somewhat freak out. She felt her face heat up as her heart was nearly beating out of her chest from the fact she had actually kissed Naruto and that she had loved the feeling of his lips against hers. She felt her blush increase before she shook the thoughts out of her head. No. I am with Stan, I am married to Stan, she thought as she sat down on the floor with her back against the door. She frowned as she softly rubbed her lips with her fingers, feeling the lingering warmth of his lips. I can't feel like this, I am married and he is dating my daughter, she thought as she tried but failed to get the feelings that were budding in her chest to go away, as all she could think about was how complete and happy the thought of him made her. She even felt herself grow a bit wet as she remembered the sight of Hailey eating off Naruto and how much she had wanted passion like that in her life and to be in Hailey's position. Mom, are you okay? Hailey asked as she came down the stairs and frowned at her mother as she seemed to be shaking her head with a dark red face before she stopped and looked up at her. Yeah, just a little still woozy from everything that happened, Francine said as she stood back up. Yeah, that must be it, she thought as she looked back towards the door, hoping she would calm down after some sleep. Naruto's home. It had been several days since the teenage Francine incident where she lost her memory but thankfully regained it again after some time, and things had been going alright so far aside from one mishap that he missed out on due to work. Apparently Roger was feeling unappreciated at the Smiths as of late because he was being mistreated via Stan, with him being in a bad mood. With the bad mood in question was the result of Stan feeling pressured at work from his supervisor, Deputy Director Bullock, because of the new guy showing off and one-upping Stan. So by all this, Stan had tried to make things more strict at home when it came closer to the Bullock dinner in hopes for gaining a promotion. End result had the dinner ending horribly with Roger coming downstairs and causing a mess when Stan tried to hide him. This ended up getting Roger into a stress-induced hibernation CYCL earlier than he planned, so he was presumed dead. So at the Smiths' residence things were feeling off with them not having Roger in their lives. Sure, Naruto hasn't known Roger for long, but he could already tell when Hailey called that she was in a depressed mood of sorts. Besides, he was warming up to him and he was actually planning to introducing Roger to Kurama and Ami so he could expand his circle of friends/abnormal entities. He eventually did find out from Hailey that Roger was actually alive and ended up in central Washington, D.C. posing as an elderly woman in hopes of getting back home after he woke up in a garbage dump. During the trip, Roger ended up traveling with a racist old woman that made him feel very uncomfortable, to which he was able to call the Smiths before they met up with him at the Smithsonian Museum. Things went south when the CIA caught wind of Roger being alive and running around in D.C., so they were chasing him around while Stan was trying to find Roger first and kill him to save his own skin. In the end, Roger had stood up to Stan in protection of the family he spent with for a decade, and Stan was moved by all this that he saved Roger's bacon by using the racist old woman to take Roger's spot as the creepy alien, since they had a close resemblance. Naruto did wish he could have helped out with finding Roger, but he was out of town for work. Hailey did understand his situation, that with him being a beta tester, that he would sometimes head to the home office to take care of his tasks. He wished though that he could tell her what his real job occupation is instead of telling her half-truths of what he really does. But he doesn't know if she is ready just yet, so does some of the other ladies living with him at this time. Currently Naruto was cleaning up his home while almost everyone was out of the house from either work or staying over at their friends' or family's places. He stayed out of the guest rooms since he wanted to respect the girls' privacy. The only room he was able to go into so far with permission was Hailey, because he was getting things ready for her items to arrive. The items that he and Hailey bought had arrived earlier in the day, so he put those into her room, and apparently Janet and Lisa bought a lot of things that they told him were surprises for him later. He was a bit curious, but he respected their privacy and stored them in Janet's room since Lisa sort of shared a room with him. As for Kurama and Ami, they were located somewhere else. Ami was currently with Tiffany since Tiff was still Ami's owner and friend, so usually wherever Tiffany went Ami wouldn't be too far behind. Also Kurama was bugging her as of late with the whole mate thing, so she wanted to get enough space from him for a time. The perverted fox, he was either with Janet or Lisa since both of them had wanted to take turns taking him to their home and showing him off. Kurama did promise Naruto he wouldn't talk in risk of exposing himself and making the families freak out. Or be a pervert. Naruto could imagine that he could be pilfering the bras and panties from the females of the specific families and hiding them for his pleasure as of this moment. Naruto was currently just setting up stuff he and Hailey ordered in her room while she was back with her family spending time with them when he felt his phone ring within his pocket, pulling it out and who he saw made him grin widely. "Hey Naruto, are you there? I need someone to talk to. Sorry that I haven't messaged you earlier. My husband has been getting on my case as of late, but I was coming to terms with what had happened that night. The truth is, I liked it and it was the best night I felt in years. Maybe we can meet up and push it a little further." 3-inch Suliyuuha typed out as he smiled. He reread what Suliyuuha had sent him and he felt bad for what she had to go through. Of course he was happy that she was thinking about him and wanted to start talking to him to vent her frustrations since everyone needed someone to vent to. He smiled as he decided to message her back so that he can raise her spirits. "Hey Sul, how are things? I am glad you chose to message me. I was growing worried about how you were after I had to leave you at the motel. I'm happy that I was able to hear from you again and to make a lovely woman like you feel good since you honestly deserve it. I'm sure we can work something out since I would love to see you again as well," he typed back before he hit send with smile as he slipped his phone back in his pocket until she was able to reply. "Thank you Naruto, you don't know what that means to me. I've had a terrible week. My son cursed me out, then my husband ignored me, refused to please me in bed like he always does and even openly flirted with another woman. Hearing from you again is a huge pick-me-up," she replied as he frowned and decided to do whatever he could to cheer her up. Throughout several hours, Naruto and Sul, a nickname he had given her to shorten her full name of Suliyuuha, had been sending each other text message while growing closer with each sentence sent back to each other. They talked so much that they started flirting with each other and they both enjoyed it greatly. During this time Naruto was finishing things up on his cleaning day and he felt that things were doing very well so far. Sure, the packages that were from Janet and Lisa were very tempting to open, but he will have to wait till later when they come home later tonight. As with Tiffany, she and Amy were supposed to be coming home soon with work being not that busy today, so she was given a half day. He was about to go pop in a DVD and watch a movie when he was interrupted by a knock on his door. He was a bit curious as he didn't know who it was because all his girls had keys or knowledge of the secret entrance inside his house in case for emergencies. Opening it up, he was half surprised that it was Stan standing there with a forced smile. "Hello neighbor. I just came by to tell you that you're invited to a part at our house hosted by yours truly and my wife. It is tomorrow. We're inviting the whole neighborhood, so I hope you come," Stan said rather fast. "Okay. Are you on something right now?" Naruto questioned as Stan was acting awfully weird. "Why would you say that?" Stan asked as his mouth and one of his eyebrows were starting to twitch. "Well, for one thing, that for as long as I had known you, you were never been this polite unless it's towards your superiors or you're trying to get something out in return," Naruto replied as he could tell he had hit the nail on the head considering how Stan was starting to get slightly fidgety. Naruto felt that Stan is about to burst, decided to reply back on the invite. "Well fine then Stan, just let me know the exact time when the party starts so I can come on by," he said as Stan released a held-up breath as he nodded before leaving. He was still wondering what that was all about, so he decided to text Francine on what was going on and why there is a party going on. It only took a few minutes before he got a reply from her saying that she was feeling that she is not connected with the rest of the neighborhood after learning that one of her neighbors had died half a year ago. So in this, she had convinced Stan to host a neighborhood block party so that she can get connected with all of the present neighbors and expand her circle of existing friends. Of course, she also told him to behave due to several past mistakes of inviting some neighbors to their house for get-togethers, and they ended horribly. Like for example, one couple almost ended up in a divorce due to Stan dropping a bomb that the wife had an abn back in college. Luckily the couple were able to go to counseling but had no longer wanted to be in contact with the Smiths ever since. Another example was when Stan kidnapped a family and investigated them because he thought they were terrorists. After they were released they never even looked at the Smiths. Naruto wasn't even surprised at all when the family ended up moving to another city or state due to what happened. He told her he still would be coming over and that he would make sure to help keep Stan under control if things started to go sour, which he sort of figured they would since Stan always seemed to make the worst of situations. Well, he was able to get the time for tomorrow's party, which was around 3 p.m. and Francine told him that it was potluck. So on this he probably had the excuse to make an old family recipe that he had been dying to make for quite some time but never got around to do so. So having a plan in mind he went to the kitchen to start making it to its perfection. This recipe was passed down from generation to generation. It was said people would literally be begging on their hands and knees for more if their willpower wasn't strong enough. While the food was being cooked he was setting out his clothes which he would make them look extra good to make a good impression on the neighborhood. He also made a call to his mechanic to deliver his other favorite car the next morning. Once checking the time he realized it would almost be time for at least one of the girls to come back home and probably serve them his family recipe to see if he still got it or needs some adjustments. While waiting for the food to get ready and watching a random movie choice about an alien, he got a ping from his phone from a number that said unknown. He was a bit curious as he didn't recognize the number as he decided to open it up and instantly was thankful that he had opened it as he recognized it as someone he hadn't seen since he was in CIA training school as she was his teacher and mentor. He had sped through training school in the course of 1 year due to his natural skills back when he was 15 and in the eyes of the United States a full-fledged adult, hence the reason his teacher didn't get in trouble when she had SEC with him. Even more so, she was the first person he had ever had SEC with, so that made her closer to him than the other girls he has dated/slept with in the past, making her dear to his heart with her being his first love. He even remembered when they first done the deed, which was after his CIA training graduation, that she wanted to reward him dearly due to her ever-growing feelings for him. After that night the two had been in a relationship for about a year before the two decided to take a break on mutual grounds. They originally wanted to date earlier while he was in his training PRD, but they would have gotten in trouble if they were caught, so they wanted to play it safe. This didn't mean the two didn't try to meet and hang out just like old times, but the last time he saw her was roughly half a year ago due to her going away on a long-distance mission. The message he had gotten from her was a video that from the one frame that showed was of her pleasuring herself with the message, "Sorry, I haven't been there for you. I just now became freelance and want to know where you are so you can own this horny beach again. 3 Scarlett Reynolds." After reading the message he finally started the video, which was about 20 minutes long, showing him her masturbating and playing with her huge CLT that was still big from their fun from years ago while she played with her massive bust. He could still remember her goddess-like figure with her wavy auburn hair and emerald green eyes. Her bust was a perfect E-cup as she had a slim waist and an peach that was perfect sized for his hands and was so soft to the touch yet very toned. Scarlett had a massive KNK for being SBMSSV to him after some point into their relationship that she had begged him to let her get a tattoo on her right peach cheek that read "Property of Naruto," while she got one at the base of her neck on her back that was a red circle with a spiral in it as it was his clan's symbol, and to make them more exotic she had the wording be written in Japanese lettering that roughly translated to Uzumaki speech, which was located over her peach. He tried to talk her out of a few of them, but she wanted that anybody who saw her naked, like in a public bath or even in a swimsuit, to know she was his property. Then again, the two were hopelessly in love and cared for each other deeply and would do anything to make each other happy. This was being one of them apparently. At the end of the video, Scarlett had asked him to call and text her again like they used to regularly when possible if he wasn't too busy so they could catch up for old time's sake, and with that the video ended, but not before she ate the fingers that she had been playing with herself with before giving him a flirty wink. With that done and a massive strong-on in his pants, Naruto quickly saved the number to his contacts so he could contact her later tonight or tomorrow morning since he figured she might be asleep by now. His thoughts were soon interrupted when he heard the garage door opening with Tiffany and Amy coming out of his car he had lent her to get to work. Apparently she came home later than usual since she was grocery shopping after getting off from work. "Hey sweetie, how's your day been?" he asked as she came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his neck gently as she kissed his cheek. "Tiresome, it was a very slow day with hardly anyone showing up and the few that did kept trying to grope me," she said with a sigh as he stroked her cheek as she rested her head on his shoulder. "My favorite manager then decided to let several girls get off early and I was one of the lucky ones due to guys constantly bothering me," she said as he turned and gave her a loving embrace. So what is up with the groceries? I thought it was going to be my turn to be next, he asked jokingly. Well, I was out and about while you were stuck at home cleaning, so I thought that this one would be on me, Tiffany replied back before she started smelling something delicious. What are you cooking, Naruto? It smells delicious, she asked as she walked over to the pots and pans on the stove. Well, there is going to be a block party tomorrow afternoon and it's potluck. So I thought I might dust off an old family recipe and see if I still got it right, he replied as she tried to sneak a small taste, but he smacked her hand with ladle. Nah, no food for you until dinner. I'm actually planning to serve it to you girls so you can get the early taste of it before I give out the food tomorrow, so consider yourselves fortunate. Naruto smiled as Tiffany cutely pouted with wanting to taste the tempting food, but she reluctantly agreed. So Ami, were you able to enjoy yourself as much as possible while you were out? He asked the female spirit as she huffed. Yes, I did, Naruto. Despite me being at that cesspool that Tiffany calls work. I tell her time and time again that she needs to find a better job occupation so she can be safer from those lecherous men, Ami replied back, getting Naruto to put his attention back towards Tiffany. Is that so? Well, it isn't that she needs to work anymore if she doesn't want to, because she doesn't have to, since she doesn't have to worry about rent. So isn't there some career you've always wanted to do? He asked as she crossed her arms as she thought for a moment. Well, I have always loved writing and stuff like that, but you need a college degree to be taken seriously, she said with a frown as he held her hand and gave it a squeeze. How about this, we take a look at the community college nearby and enroll you in some classes later in the week for the upcoming semester. I wouldn't mind paying for it since it is for you after all, he said as he kissed her hand as she gained a massive smile before jumping at him and hugging him tightly. You'd seriously do that for me? She asked in shock as he nodded and kissed her softly. If this makes you happy then I am all for it, he said as he placed kisses all over her cheeks as she giggled and smiled. Surprise! We're back. Lisa and Janet sang out as he heard the front door open as he saw them smiling at him with Kurama nestled in between Janet's melons. I thought you two were spending time with your family, he said as they came up and kissed his cheeks as Kurama smirked perversely before he jumped out of Janet's arms towards Ami. Ami! My love! Kurama called out before Ami effortlessly sidestepped him, and caused him to crash into the wall as Naruto chuckled as he held Lisa and Janet close to him. Wouldn't be surprised if this became normal and the walls ended up with Kurama-sized indents on them. I missed you two all day, he said as he kissed their cheeks before he swatted their hands away from the food on the stove. Foxy, what are you cooking? It smells amazing. Lisa said with a drool and a hungry grin on her face. Some food for all of you, but you all can wait until it is done, he said with a smirk as he waved them away from the stove. Each of the girls decided to settle down and freshen up after a long day so they could kill some time till they get to taste Naruto's special meal. Sure, they had tasted some of Naruto's cooking in the past and they enjoyed it, but this is supposed to be an old family recipe that he is whipping up for tomorrow's block party. Janet wanted to come to the party, but her mother wanted to spend one of those rare days together with her father for a family get-together. She didn't mind it much but somewhat wished it could have been on another day. Tiffany would need to skip out because even though she got a half day today, she felt she would need to make it up to her favorite manager tomorrow during the shift and help out around the place. Besides that, she wanted to roughly look over programs available at the community college. If she remembered correctly that Hailey goes to the one nearby, so Tiffany could possibly try to ask her for help. Lisa though had nothing else planned tomorrow, so she decided to attend the block party tomorrow afternoon. She did say something about how she wanted to talk to Hailey about something, but he didn't pry, as Lisa said, with a wink, how it was private. After a bit of the discussions, dinner was ready and the girls were very anticipated on the meal. Even Ami was feeling hungry with what the smell was, and despite being an animal, she was still a spirit so she could eat any food. Their surprise for the meal was a stew of sorts with a mystery mixture of spice, herbs, and broth, with only a few things that were noticeable were a few meats of beef, chicken and pork. With some vegetables, they were strong to tell because of being saturated into the broth for so long along with being diced up to very small proportions. They figured with the amount of meat was because serving up a large meal for their hefty appetites and possibly for the party tomorrow making that much more hungry. Once digging in, their taste buds went into overdrive with flavor and taste that they demanded more after devouring their servings quite quick surprisingly. Never knowing how much they wanted to finish their portions so quickly just for more. Even Amy had commented that the food felt divine that made her much happier than earlier with her sour mood. With their stomachs full they just wanted to lay down and relax not knowing that they were drifting off to a blissful sleep. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle on the sight of his house members that he decided to properly get them to their beds and tuck them in for the night. Carrying each of his girls to their designated beds were a bit strong with them not wanting to let go until he gave them a soft, gentle embrace on their foreheads that got them to let go and properly get tucked in. He wished them a good night before going to the kitchen and clean up before making a new batch of his family recipe for the party tomorrow. Hopefully these people had a bigger appetite than the girls so they wouldn't go to sleep. Block party, afternoon. The girls woke up in a very pleasant mood after remembering the meal they had last night but of course Janet and Lisa were slightly disappointed. The two had wanted to show off what they had gotten in their packages that night but that meal was just so good that they had passed out afterwards. After getting ready for the day, Janet and Tiffany with Amy all left for their plans for the day after giving him an embrace goodbye. Lisa though stayed behind since she had nothing else to do and possibly mingling with the other neighbors sounded a bit good before she would chat with Hailey. They waited until it was time for the party before they left the house. On their way there they saw several neighbors already there and that they were finishing setting things up. Naruto, with the help of Lisa, carried some of the stew pots to the party before walking over to Francine. Naruto. I'm so glad you could make it, Francine said with a smile as she gave him a gentle hug as she smiled at the girl he brought along, figuring it to be a friend of his. You can set your food down at the table over there, she said as she pointed at a table that was full of food. Thanks Francine, thanks for inviting me, he said after he hugged her back before heading over to the table. That's Hailey's mom? Lisa asked as they headed over to the table and Naruto nodded. Yeah, she's a sweet woman. Stuck with a JRK of a husband if you ask me but whatever, he said as they set their stew pots down on the table. After setting things up he looked around at the neighbors to see Francine with the Channel 3 news anchors, Greg and Terry heading his way. It was a bit of a surprise since he didn't know they lived in the neighborhood. Hey Naruto, let me introduce you to some of my friends, Greg and Terry, she said as he properly greeted them with a happy smile and a handshake to each of them. Nice to meet you too. While you are both here why don't you three try out my old family recipe that I put together for the occasion, Naruto said with a smile as he handed each of them a bowl of the stew. It only took a single tasting of the stew before they were drooling from the taste of it. Oh you have got to let me in on this recipe Naruto, it's absolutely divine, Terry said as Greg agreed. So divine. Tastes so much better than previous stews we tried out a while back, Greg replied back as Naruto shook his head with a chuckle. Sorry but it's an old family recipe and it has to stay in the family. Hope you two understand, Naruto said as the news anchors nodded on that fact. Well you have got to let us come over sometime or the other way around so we can have more of this delicious meal, Terry said as he dug right back into his meal before going for seconds with Greg following. Naruto smiled as he saw several neighbors grabbing for the disposable bowls and serving themselves up some of his stew. He was glad people were enjoying the food. His smile grew a bit as he saw Lisa a bit away chatting with Hailey and was happy as he saw the two were getting along quite well. He hoped the two would get close and become good friends with each other. He went back to his stew and gotten himself a serving of his stew before he noticed someone at a far corner from the block party alone from the rest of the party. The female must have been around Francine's age, maybe younger, but from the look on her stunningly appealing face she seemed a bit depressed. She had a bronze tone to her skin that he had only seen from people of Middle Eastern descent. She had a figure with very nice curves with some weight in the right places such as in her peach and melons. She had some appealing hazel eyes that sparkled and complement her slightly curled, pitch-black hair perfectly, and to top it off she had big pouty lips that looked incredibly tempting. She was the definition of a mature exotic beauty of, what he guessed, Middle Eastern or Indian heritage, but he didn't care since either way she was still gorgeous. After seeing her depressed state, along with seeing she had nothing to eat, he decided to get her a serving of his stew before heading towards her and maybe strike up a conversation along the way. Linda sighed as she had been in a terrible mood as of late with her love life, or lack thereof. Ever since her arranged marriage, something she figured had been forgotten in the past where it belonged, she had felt depressed, extremely so. And the thing to make it all worse was that her husband was gay, only choosing to go through with it to hide from his parents while he continued to look for a boyfriend. Though, of course, her wishes and needs were forgotten like usual in their open relationship. Sure, she was fine living with him since the two became good friends, though she longed to find a significant other that could make her actually happy. She was a bit upset that she had to give him her first time to keep the charade up when their parents suddenly came to visit. It was absolutely awkward for them, both of them, and the two wished it could have been different, but what's done is done. She came to this block party in hopes of finding a single guy to meet, or at least some more friends that she could cherish and bring out her wild side, something that she rarely showed in fear of people rejecting her. So far she had only met her one neighbor who invited her to the party, Francine, who looks very appealing in her opinion. She had an opinion on women due to her experimenting in college and found it enjoyable being with another woman, but didn't go with a man since she wanted to save that for her wedding. She did regret it, but she always wanted to experience the touch of a man and true love. She and Bob did come up with the plan where she could ever get petergriffin from someone else other than Bob to hide his homosexuality if she fell for someone else. The idea was that since Bob was sterile and she wanted a baby, they both agreed to artificially inseminate one from a friend or from the person she ever would fall for. It was a good idea, but since she still hadn't found someone that would go along with that, much least win over her love. Her thoughts were soon interrupted when she heard footsteps coming closer to her, and when she looked up she saw a very stunning, young man. His blonde hair looked like gold with the red tips adding to the effect as if they were on fire. Even his whisker tattoos must have been painful in the process, making him look even more rugged and handsome. "Hi, couldn't help but see you were all alone, so I thought I'd be a good neighbor and introduce myself," he said with a smile as he handed her a bowl. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and what is your lovely name to match your lovely appearance?" he asked as her cheeks glowed with a blush. She somewhat seemed to shut down before it started back up slowly with one thought in mind: hide that you are married. She quickly slipped her hands behind her back, slipping off her ring, slipping it in her back pocket before she held out her hand. "Hello, my name's Linda, nice to meet you," she said as he smiled at her, bringing her hand up to place an embrace on the back of it. "Lovely name, just like I thought," he said as he let go of her hand with a smile. "Now why are you all alone? Doesn't seem fair," he teased her as she blushed and waved him off. "I'm not good with new people, a bit shy," she said as he linked his arm in hers with a smile. "Well, there is always time to change that," he said as she started to stutter before he gently led her towards the rest of the neighbors. As she realized she was being led towards some people he knew, she grew a bit nervous. "And Naruto? See, can I have my arm back?" she asked as he chuckled. "Only if you promise not to run away," he said as she nodded with a light blush. She blushed as she walked alongside him and took a bite out of the stew and couldn't believe the taste that it made her give out a and savor each bite. "Glad you like my cooking," Naruto said as she nodded with a smile. "It's delicious, I didn't know it was yours," she said as he nodded and patted his chest with a smirk. "It's a family recipe, passed through each generation, and I decided to make it for all of you considering I just moved here not too long ago and I wanted to make a good impression," he said as he winked at her with a smirk. "Well, you've won me over, that's for sure," she said as she tried to cover the blush on her cheeks as he smiled down at her happily. "Good, winning over a beauty like yourself is always a good thing and a major win in my books," he said as he stroked her cheek, making her blush turn dark red before he pulled his hand away, making her frown and silently whine as it left her cheek. So what is a lovely lady like yourself doing here all alone? Do you live here all alone? He asked as she nervously rubbed her arm before she looked up at him nervously before the last person she wanted near her walked up to her. He always had the worst timing. Linda, there you are. This is my wife. I wanted to introduce you to Francine, Bob said as he wrapped his arm around her shoulder. Linda nervously looked towards Naruto, afraid he might be angry at her for leading him on, but was somewhat surprised as he didn't look affected or angry at all as he just smiled at her like he was moments before. Oh, I've met her already. I didn't know she was your wife, you lucky man, Francine joked as Linda blushed a bit before she got free from Bob's arm and walked away in embarrassment as she wanted to get away before Naruto said anything. Hold up, Linda. No need to run, she heard Naruto call out before he caught up with her and gently grabbed her shoulders. I am sorry about keeping my marriage hidden, I really am. I didn't mean to dash, she started to say in a worried tone before Naruto stopped her speaking as he started to chuckle. Linda, I don't mind that you hid that, you were bound to have a good reason since you don't strike me as someone who just cheats for the hell of it. Naruto said with a huge warm smile that made Linda smile and giggle. You don't have to tell me why you kept it hidden if you don't want to, since I don't want to make you shy away. Though don't be afraid to call me if you ever want to talk, he said with a smile as she nervously nodded and accepted the card with his number. It wasn't that she didn't want to tell him, it was more she was nervous to do so since she felt if she unloaded all of her troubles on him she might freak him out and make him run away from her. She could try to ease things in and warm him up into the idea, but for now just take things slow or else going too fast will lose her chance with this possibly great man. As she walked over to the food table to get more of Naruto's stew before making her way back to Bob, she can't help but look back to Naruto and had a hopeful feeling in her chest that he could accept her. So Linda, how was it chatting with that cutie? Bob asked as Linda couldn't help but blush as her husband chuckled. Well, I enjoyed our brief chat until you interrupted Bob, Linda lightly scolded him. As you must know, I already called dibs, so you can't try and flirt with him since I believe he is fully straight. Oh, I wasn't planning on that, he seems pretty good for you, Linda, so good luck, he replied back as he took a sip of his drink. You'll need it with you having some competition. Wait, what do you mean? She asked confused as he pointed towards Francine. Well, so far as I can see that when he was going after you when you left, I saw Francine trailing her eyes on his nice tight peach of his. I have a strong feeling she's interested in him a lot, but who knows, Bob said as he went back to his food. Linda frowned as she thought what Bob said over as she was finishing up her food. She kept wondering if Francine, her new friend, really has feelings for Naruto or if it was just feeling desperate and staring at another man for a moment. She did hope it was the latter, but she still had Naruto's number on hand so she could always call him later and ask if he knew. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 4. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Dragon from Heaven on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.